to those attending the Environmental Facilities Committee meeting for Newquay Town Council. I'm the committee chair, Councillor Larson, and we open the meeting by asking if we have apologies, which I believe we have for Councillor Towell. Sorry, he's not. Is he of this committee? Yes. And who has been unable to make it recently. And do we have apologies from Councillor Monk?
I haven't received any in the office, so he may still arrive.
Right.
So it might be a late arrival. He's on a business trip and he's flying in today.
Yeah. So we're awaiting. Yeah, fingers crossed for him. Okay, thank you. The second point on our agenda is to receive any declarations of interest and dispensations in respect to items on the agenda. I will just point out that I've done some of the volunteer weeding with the Crantock Street Community Garden and attended one meeting about a year and a half ago. So I don't think, and there's no personal benefit I'd be gaining, but I just thought it would be better to, and I guess I know Anna J and one or two of the other people, but yeah, there's no actual personal benefit to be gained out of it. So, but I just declare that, like many residents, many of us I've seen Councillor Monk at the events at Crantock Street Community Garden as well. So, a few of us have attended those. Did anybody else have any other points of interest? No? Okay, thank you. So, the next point is to review the minutes from the last meeting, and basically, I'll just ask councillors, did you have any points to raise from the last minutes, or shall we take them as read and confirmed? No points from councillors? Okay, can I propose that the minutes are passed for the ENF meeting on the 10th of September this year? Would anybody like to second that? Councillor Slade, thank you. And we'll vote in favour of that one. So, all in favour? Okay, thank you, everybody. Great, thank you. Do we have any matters arising from the minutes? I didn't see anything that wasn't already either in this agenda or other meeting agendas. So, did anybody else have any? Yes, Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, can I just ask, and we might have to go into closed session to do it, so I'm happy to wait. But what's the situation with, because I'd left by that point in the meeting, what's the situation with weed control? Where are we with that?
Is on the agenda here today.
Is it?
Yes. Well, there's a point 7, which would discuss some of that.
Okay.
That's probably the more appropriate place to
discuss it. That's fine.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, point 5, and so as to not keep anybody waiting as well, is the open session for electors of Newquay. We've received one for written letter, but that's at point number 7, which I'll presume we can just move to at that point. So, would anybody like to speak today? Shirley from Town Team? Great, thank you.
Right, I haven't got an agenda, so I don't quite know what point it is on the agenda, but I'm here in case anybody has any questions to ask in relation to the steering committee and approval of the terms of reference. 2 members to be delegated to make any decisions because we are on a very tight deadline and we need to get this lottery bid sorted and ready to go for the 20th of December. And then C is a request for some funding, which is really the same way as the town team has worked. We know that Laura likes to have an internal funding for Mount Wise, and then so that's for up to £500 for use of internal resources within that lottery bid project, and then up to £300 delegated to Andy and Anne, just in case we have to go out and spend some money in order to make this all happen. At this moment in time, we have no idea what that would be. Anne's found, well, it's coming out of the match funding that's held in the EMR, is it? It's in the last year's budget. Yeah, so most of this is going to be internal transfers of funding.
I'm totally confused. What are we talking about?
Steering.
For what? Oh,
All right.
okay.
So,
I didn't. Sorry, I didn't pick that up. What's the lottery application for?
right. So we have a lottery bid going in for. It will be about £1.5 million for 3 years. That's the bid, and it is to get the community involved in projects that are all climate related within Newquay. The steering group is a group of experts that have been put together to help Kieran actually put together the grant application, and then will remain and be another group like the town team is, but always concentrating on climate, because Kieran genuinely believes that climate will be part of every application, whether you go for arts or heritage or anything. There will always be a climate element for the next few years.
Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. Just for clarification, I'm conscious we're wavering onto agenda item 9. So it's whether there's any members of the public that have a question, and if not, I'd strongly recommend we move that agenda item up and then allow Shirley to speak through that agenda item, if that's okay.
Okay, apologies, I propose that we move agenda item 9 to the next discussion now. Any secondment for that, please? Yes, councillors. And all in favour? Yes, thank you. Okay. So agenda item 9 is on the climate steering group. As you've just been saying, we have some documents here, so that just helps us look at them, which most of us have looked at before the meeting. And we have a quick report on the climate action team's efforts, and then, as you pointed out, an application. And I just point out that my understanding is the big picture is that there's a lottery grant available for up to around £1 million. Is that right?
I think you can go to 2 million,
grants,
but our aim is 1.5 million over 3 years.
Right.
That's what we're constructing the numbers to go forward with.
Great. And that grant requires that community representatives develop the application. Hence, Newquay Town Council's grants officer has done an open application process for community members to apply to be on the committee, and Shirley, you represent the town team there, and now you're in the process together, rapidly meeting weekly, I think.
We are definitely, we're meeting every Monday night, not next Monday night,
Right.
because we're actually in the process of putting those numbers together, so we think that will probably take a fortnight.
To get an application together before the end of the year when it's due, and it looks as though are asking for some small support from the town council to keep that process moving for that. And then, as you say, even if that grant wasn't to be won, look, there'd be a lot of work on what people in the town think is needed on a climate, nature, biodiversity benefits basis as well. So thank you to everybody who's doing that. Is it Joe or Anne? Would either of you like to brief? Have I?
Brutally honest, Chair, I'm not intimately involved with this
that's
project.
Fine.
So, I mean, there's 3 recommendations within the report.
Thank you.
And I would utilise Shirley whilst she's here if you've got any questions.
Yeah, thank you. So they're in point 4 of that application. They ask for our agreement to approve terms of reference, agreement that 2 members are delegated to make any decision needed so that the project can move quickly towards its submission date on the 20th of December this year, and the request for committee support for the steering group and of internal cost transfers, or support in kind of up to £500 and a small operating budget of £300 to be made available to cover any miscellaneous additional costs the council might need to pay for until the 31st of March. And I don't entirely understand the final line. They reference 15,000 in 2020. I think that means that's where somebody in the council may have said the budget was available from. So Councillor Gardner has a question. Thank you.
Yeah, I need a proper brief on this, rather than just a few minutes in a available to ask Shirley. This is a huge topic. We are potentially signing the council up to be the accountable body for £1.5 million of public money. It's not to be taken lightly. It's a really important thing that we get right. So I'm just, I think we need to discuss it in the right time on the agenda. And if we haven't got an officer here who can answer it, we need an officer here who can answer the questions, because I'm going to have some really deep questions on this, because it is a lot of cash and we need to get it right.
Councillor Hannan?
Yeah, I mean, just for future reference for myself, I've got to be honest. I mean, I saw this on IBABS when it came on the agenda. I've done a search again through my council emails to try and find anything on this that has been sent out to me. I appreciate it's a steering group, and I can look around the room, and all the steering group that I can see here that are party to it or are nodding. But I'm right behind the curve on this, sadly, and it's probably my fault. For future reference, where would the communication be for someone not on the steering group? Where would I see it? Just so I know in future, so I don't get caught out like this.
So I know it's been to GNR twice. It was discussed at the last meeting because Councillor Thompson, I think, you had to put an expression of interest if you wanted to be on the steering group. And Councillor Thompson was our nominated person to do that. So it has been round the houses quite a bit, but I'm sure Anne can fill us in a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that. I know that I believe there were emails that went round with regards to the notice going up on the council's Facebook page and on the website and advertising. So all of the members were involved with that, I believe, before we actually went live to look at this. It's been to 2 GNR committees where we've talked about the criteria, and at the last GNR meeting they decided that they felt the project belonged really with the ENF committee. So there has been emails around this project that I believe have gone to members, maybe not in the level of detail that you may not have liked, but it has been at meetings and there have been opportunities that I believe people have been able to ask questions. So I just, I'm happy to answer questions if I can, whilst Kieran's not here.
Are we discussing this now, Chair, or are we discussing it? Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, I mean, £1.5 million, which I presume is going to be a capital revenue kind of split. Putting that through in a statement of accounts, that is about the same size as that, on a bit more than normally the council's budget. On that, I don't think it's something to be taken lightly and needs to go through full council in my eyes, because this is a lot of money, and I'm personally seeing in my day job now organisations that have taken on being an accountable body, and there is a lot of fallout. It's not just a question of getting the money in and giving it out to the group to spend on events. There are a lot of responsibilities that come with being an accountable body for a lottery grant, and I genuinely wouldn't want to sign the council up for that without the full council having their say on it. And actually, we're putting officers in a, there will be a big reporting responsibility on this, and I just need to. I genuinely, I'm a bit behind the curve. I knew about the group, yeah. Fantastic. I didn't know about this particular one, and I just don't think it's something for a town council to take lightly without full council discussing it.
I'm not sure if it has been to full council or not through a GNR agenda. I'm not sure if it has been discussed because I haven't been to those meetings, so I'm not able to comment on that. But I know that the steering group and Shirley, who has been involved with smaller grant involvements with the council, and myself, who have discussed with Shirley and the steering group and the town clerk, in that the funding bid will cover posts that will look at running the project and doing the additional workload that's part of the bid.
In that case, I would definitely want it to go to full council, because you're talking about taking on extra members of staff only temporarily. What's the duration? Is there any liability for redundancy at the end of it, as there is sometimes if you go over 2 years, etc., etc., etc. I think everything I'm hearing makes me think I want to know more, but I want everyone to know more.
So I'm just thinking that, you know, we could have a vote on it, but it would go to full council, which is 4th December, is it 4th? Can't remember.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I'm sure Shirley would still be working on the actual application.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to propose we refer this to full council, and I'd request actually a formal presentation perhaps before full council from whoever, from the group, or, you know, with Kieran there as well, because I think there's going to be a lot of questions. I've certainly got a lot of questions about it. I find it really interesting, fascinating. You know, they've done it in Bude. For example, there's the group in Truro as well that have got premises and all that sort of stuff. Bude's on coastal erosion mostly, but the group in Truro, I know, have got their premises down near the Hedgehog roundabout there and all that sort of stuff. Find it really interesting, but it's kind of, because I want to know more, that I think we need a, you know, good old brief and everything.
Please, Shirley, you go first.
I don't know if I'm on. It is 3 years, so it's 1.5 million over 3 years. Okay. So it's 500,000. Well, it will be phased towards the back end for inflation, but so it's not quite 1.5 to match the total.
In that case, if it's 3 years and taking someone on for 3 years, there's definitely a redundancy liability, because then even fixed term contracts to take on for over 2 years, there is. We'll find it now with Cornwall Council, so yeah, we'll definitely want to discuss it.
Yeah, excuse my voice. Thanks, Shirley, and thank you to the Climate Steering Group. I know that you are working really hard every Monday meeting, getting this grant application together. I hear your concerns, Councillor Gardner. I would say we have an officer, a grants officer, you know, who at the moment is leading on this alongside Anne, who's our responsible finance officer. I wouldn't want to do anything to jeopardise the opportunity to meet the deadline for the application, which I believe is the 20th of December. So, you know, I'd be happy to, having looked through the terms of reference, happy to agree to the terms of reference. I think it talks about an appointed officer from the town council. I think we already agreed it was Councillor Thompson. In terms of the 3 requests at the end, happy to support those, and happy to have an item on a full council meeting where the members of the Climate Steering Group, alongside Kieran and Shirley, can present what the intention of the group is, what the intention of the monies are, and you know, and move forward in that way. So happy to propose all those things.
So my proposal was to refer this to full council for the vote, with a recommendation from this refer it to full council for a vote, with a presentation before full council from the group involved, and have the grants officer available to answer any questions.
Right. So,
I'm happy to say.
sorry. Thank you. Sorry, Shirley. Thank you.
Without, let's just go for, if we ignored section B and said that we would come back to the full council, can section C be approved? Because I don't see, we're already behind the curve in internal allocations. So that would be my ask.
Oh, I believe the process we need to follow is to vote on the first proposal and then vote on the second proposal. Is that, no?
Was there a seconder for the second proposal?
Yeah, sure. So, thank you.
So just for our minutes, can you just clarify your first proposal, Councillor Creed?
Yeah, sure. So the proposal was to accept the terms of reference with Councillor Thompson as the appointed member within the terms of reference, and to agree to items A, was it A, B and C, 1, 2 and 3 at the end.
First proposal from Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor Hannan. Votes in favour of that, please. So 2. And against? I'm going to.
Can I just be clear?
Sure.
Sorry, involved full council in the decision, and you've just voted to not involve full council in the
It's
decision.
not what we voted. We voted in line with councillor.
I believe we voted.
To additional points as well, to support the group to carry on their work.
But full council won't get a vote now, will they?
No, they may potentially still get a vote.
Can you just clarify, full council won't get a vote now?
From, no, not that I can see from that resolution.
Okay, can I have those names down in minutes then, please, of who voted for what?
I believe you have to ask before the vote.
No, before it's resolved.
Well, it has been resolved. Yeah.
We haven't resolved it because you haven't taken votes against, so the vote's not finished yet.
Okay.
I haven't voted against yet.
You put a recommendation on.
Recommendation, your recommendation.
So,
We voted against.
I didn't vote on the second one yet.
No, we haven't done the second
You
one
voted,
yet.
I haven't.
We haven't done the second one yet.
Ask for a name vote.
All right,
on
okay.
the recommendation.
Okay, so we haven't had the second one. So can I ask for a name vote for the second vote, please?
So I believe councillor Creek's proposal was to support the recommendations for the current work, the ABC here on page, number 4 in the update given to this committee. And he additionally suggested that there is an update to full council. Thank you. So I've said I'd second that. And how many votes in favour of that, please? Okay, thank you. And against? Thank you. Okay. And you, Shirley, for the... I'm sorry.
Can I just add, am I getting 2 delegated members or am I coming to full council?
Sorry, alongside Sarah, I would recommend that you, Councillor Larson, is the other delegated member.
Thank you. So you have one already from GNR, I believe, which was Councillor Thompson, and Councillor Creek has just suggested that myself be the second. And I don't know, do we need to go through another process on voting that, or?
You've just voted for the 3 recommendations in the report. So.
Right, that 2 members be delegated.
Sorry, it can't be Councillor Thompson because she's on the steering committee. Well, it needs to be 2 independent ones, so from, yeah.
I'd like to recommend a second councillor to be delegated to be involved in supporting that. And thank you, Shirley and the team, for the good work. Thank you. And we look forward to the big update at full council and as Councillor Gardner said, a full discussion and any subsequent discussions to ensure that a responsible application was made. Thank you. Point on the agenda may be to vote for grants, is that correct? Applications and grants, to receive, consider and determine applications. So we've had the applications. Thank you very much to the 3 groups by Crantock Community Garden and Nansland Community Centre and the Bleed Control Cornwall. And Joe will then brief us.
Just to give some context for your budget. So firstly, I just want to extend my apologies to this committee. I did make an error back in July. I did try to explain that to yourselves and GNR by email, but I appreciate some councillors didn't quite understand, and that's probably down to my own miscommunication. So essentially in July, I had the C&T budget notes in front of me, and I wrongly thought that this committee had 5,000 to play with. You didn't, you had 2,500. Unfortunately, that error continued. Until it was picked up rightly by the RFO last week. So we were already at a time-sensitive point at which the application's already been received and we'd already scheduled presentations, and the agenda was also ready to be published. So I was in a little bit of a quandary. I had the mayor to reach out to as the only one available at the time. So we came up with some options available to us in this committee, which we thought were reasonable. So one option around it would be to just defer all grants to GNR. So that effectively shoves the 3 to GNR, equating to 5 going to GNR for presentations. Or the alternative was we stick with the presentations coming to this evening, and we stick to the 2,500 limit, but any approvals for funding, if there are any, they're recommended to GNR to come out of GNR's either unspent grants budget or your EMR. Because the first phase of grants there was no first phase that went to GNR, so GNR does still technically have an unspent of 2,500. So that was our recommendation. I appreciate not all members agree with that, and I can only apologise for my mistake. It wasn't a mistake of this committee, it wasn't a mistake of the councillors, but that's where we are. So I just thought I'd give some clarification on that.
Thank you, Joe. That's really helpful, and we'll get through. Appreciate your openness there. Really helpful. If I understand it rightly, we have 3 applications for 2,500 each. One of them's for 1,000. My apologies. And we have 1 grant pot for 2,500 with this committee, and 1 grant pot for 2,500 with the GNR committee. Is that correct? No, sorry, I've missed.
Do you want me to clarify? As I was the one that took Joe's call last week, I think, and essentially we've got 2,500 from GNR that we know will not be spent in this fiscal term, and in which case we may as well use it on grant funds. So my suggestion was to utilise that. We also have a grants EMR which could be utilised, which also sits with GNR. I appreciate that we will want to have a discussion around these grants. I think we've already had a good discussion, and I'd be happy to propose that we utilise the 2,500 underspend of the GNR grants pot and offer that to the Crantock Street Gardens. I'd also like to propose that we take 2.5 from the GNR grants EMR for the Nansleddon Community Centre. And then I'd be happy, I have some concerns over the bleed control, particularly given that these are corporate entities that are going to be using these, and for the reasons I said earlier about the fact that if they're not buying them, are they going to get well used? I'd be happy to subsidise them by offering 20% of the cost of those for up to 10 units, so £200 from the GNR grants EMR for bleed control Cornwall. That would be my proposal.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't really hold with the approach. We've got money, so we might as well spend it. It's public money. We have to do due diligence on each one. I don't think this committee can recommend how GNR spends its EMRs. It's up for GNR to decide which comes from which and all that sort of stuff. However, I do endorse this committee recommending that both that the Crantock Street Community Garden and Nansleddon Community Association are approved. I'll be honest, I've got a bit of an issue with the bleed kits in terms of they're going into private establishments, and I think that they should contribute. I'm not sold totally yet on subsidy, but I'm willing to listen. But yeah, I've got issues where they're going into private businesses, and I think as a bar owner or a restaurant owner or whatever, you have a responsibility to those people within your establishment and their health and safety and their care. But I'm open to that. But I agree that we actually support and recommend that GNR fund, however they want to do it, Crantock Street and Nansleddon.
So Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. If that proposal is slightly amended in line with what Councillor Gardner said, that this is a recommendation to GNR to use those funds, well, it will have to be, but I think the grant applicants need to be aware that this, us approving that or recommending, is not the final decision. It has to go to another committee to release that money. But I would second the proposal that we recommend the 2 releases of 2,500 for the 2 groups as presented. And I've got to be honest, I think the bleed kits are a great idea. My reservation is the fact that we're putting them into private businesses. I would also second the proposal for the 20% subsidy, because I think a bit of incentive wouldn't be a bad thing, and then it's down to the businesses to make up the difference, and they're getting a deal on it, and we're taking a little bit of responsibility. So I would second the proposal if it's clear it's a recommendation, not we're approving it at this stage. It's got to go one stage further, I'm afraid.
Councillor North.
Can I just ask, when's the next GNR, so that
29th.
of this month? Yeah, that's okay. I couldn't find it in my diary, but obviously the people here wouldn't. Pardon?
Yeah, on the bleed kit. Yeah. Can I just amend what I said, just to clarify? So to clarify Councillor Hannan's point, it would have to be a recommendation anyway, because we can't spend GNR's money without their permission, clearly. So recommend everything I just said, with the ever so slight amendment at the end with the bleed control kits, subject to those obviously being purchased by the businesses. So we would want proof that the businesses purchased them, and then we would provide the subsidy.
All in favour of the proposal? Great, unanimous, thank you. And thank you to all the applicants. Apologies, you have to wait a little bit longer. It seems to be really busy this year. And but we thought you did great presentations, and we hope to see everything supported. And we do want to support the businesses in the town to get the bleed kits as well, eventually, presuming they're also getting involved. And I just make another point that, you know, I wonder whether, I don't know if it's appropriate, I'm sorry, but if it is, if it's possible eventually for the town council to use our social media to support awareness of the bleed kits, you know, see if that's something we might be able to do. But as I say, I can't right now say whether we're actually allowed to do that. So, but I do think, you know, we're all on the same page that we want to see them out, and awareness. And yes, and a link to the video, the 8-minute video, that would be fantastic. If it's there, exactly, thank you. Nans Ledden Group. Yes. I don't believe so, no, yeah. And your presentations were great as well, so very fulsome. I mean, you know, we could see everything we needed to as councillors. Councillor Pawecki and Anne, sorry.
And just for clarity, the GNR committee were made aware of the oversight ahead of time, and they have been issued the presentations as well. So you might not have all of GNR committee here, but they have been circulated your presentations.
I believe they can ask questions of the other councillors if they need to.
Can I just say something before you guys go, just so that you're aware? If it goes to GNR and they recommend it comes out of an EMR, it needs to go to full council on the 4th of December. So just in terms of timeframes, I wanted you to know that, so that you're not getting too excited and then it's delayed again. That's the full process.
It's just a case of we need to know when to get the thumbs up so that we can then start ordering the floor. Because you don't want to order the floor and then start.
The next item on the agenda was number 7, correspondence, and there is an anonymous email to Councillor Nick Morris headed, Councillor Creek, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off. I mean, you could have finished. I mean, more than appropriate, but it strikes me that this is a Cornwall Council issue, given that they're talking about grass verges, weeds on grass verges, and soil in gutters. So it strikes me that this is a Cornwall Council issue, so I'd recommend that we forward this on to the appropriate officer at Cornwall Council.
I'm happy to second that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't hear any comments. So who would like to vote to support that
Can we have a discussion?
proposal? Yes.
It's clearly about weeds and gutters as well as weeds on verges. I agree. The verges is a Cornwall Council issue. The gutters thing is still not resolved. We still don't. So I asked a question at the start. What's now the situation? What has been decided that this council are going to do about weeds in gutters or curb edges, however you want to put it?
Thank you. Sorry, just to clarify, Newquay Town Council isn't responsible for gutters in this town. That is a Cornwall Council responsibility, as is the highway. Newquay Town Council was conducting spraying of glyphosate, which is a historic decision. That decision was overturned this year. As for the ongoing management of the highway, that is once again a Cornwall Council issue, and we have written to Cornwall Council, to my knowledge, at least twice this year to make them aware of that.
That wasn't what I asked. I'm not interested in getting into the whys and the wherefores. You've got one opinion, I've got another opinion. What was decided at the last meeting about any action or not on the curb edge? And I don't want to get a curb out and go that bit, not that bit. The bit that we were managing that we're now not. What is the way forward? Because I believe there was some discussions.
So it's in the minutes, which I thought you had read, and it says that there was a decision to ask that that our environment officer booked a sweeper for the streets. I believe there were, well, I saw emails back and forth about that, but I haven't seen a booking, and I haven't seen a quote yet from.
That's what I was after, an update on that particular thing.
That's the quick update.
That particular thing, and also I'm quite interested in what we think we're going to do about the cars parked in the way when that booking takes place.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I mean, hopefully that's going to be asked, but I was at that meeting. I stayed behind when we had to extend the meeting, and I was a little bit shocked because up until that point on the table for the committee was, we'd already agreed as a committee that we were going to spend the budget that we had put aside for spraying. We all appreciate that we're all looking desperately for alternatives to spraying. I think that's agreed. At that meeting, there was a contract on the table to go ahead and do what this committee had initially said it was going to do, which was the 10% manual treatment of weeds. That meant, unfortunately, 90% wasn't going to be treated. That was actually on the table. The contractor had come forward and offered to do that. At that meeting, in the last 15 minutes, in extra time, we as a committee completely scrubbed that idea. I voted against the decision to completely scrub that idea. And the alternative, which is what we've always been seeking, right back from the GNR meeting that put it back to this committee, was brought up at the last minute that we would look at getting a road sweeper. Now, in fairness, I voted against that because it was just such a grabbing at straws in the dying minutes of a meeting after we'd had a solution that I thought as a committee we'd gone out to seek, and we just completely rejected it and went off on a plan C. Now, I'm concerned that this has still not been to council because initially the biodiversity report was what was saying that this council would not use artificial spray. That diversity report was supposed to go to full council for approval. It's never been approved yet. The policy, sorry. So full council haven't agreed on a diversity policy that stops us spraying as a council. And what this committee has done is completely bypassed that, ignored the fact council have had no say in it whatsoever, and has gone down the path of deciding as a committee that we won't spray when we haven't still got a viable alternative. And now we're putting our hands up and the mayor is saying, well, it's not our problem, it's Cornwall Council's problem. If it wasn't our problem in the beginning, Why have we spent so much time looking for Plan B and we still haven't been to full council? So there's a lot of councillors out there that are going to get emails eventually. I'm amazed that we haven't had complaints already. I agree that last complaint is mainly vergers, but they'll come when people realise what's happening. And there's councillors out there that have had no say in this decision whatsoever, because the biodiversity policy still hasn't got to council. So this committee, in my opinion, has bypassed council yet again, and that's where we are. So what is Plan B? Or are we just saying now it's not our responsibility and we're going to shelve it, as the Mayor's saying?
Thank you. That was at least 3 minutes there. Thank you. If I may, just quickly on the point on going to full council, I believe I've tried to support that a number of times and had various different councillors say, no, you have to do X, Y, Z in advance, and then worked on those points. So, and then, as you say, I agree that people will be noticing, but as I walk along, it's considerable overgrow from the verges in a lot of places. Actually, I think a lot of people don't mind that. I've actually heard people say they're not too fast, but I'll let Councillor Creek speak further. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for putting words in my mouth. That's clearly not what I said. Let's be really clear. You're confusing two issues here. The first is an issue that is one that this committee has, the right and has democratically made its decision on, which is whether to continue to, on behalf of Cornwall Council, spray the roads of this town with poison in the form of glyphosate. That was decided many months ago that we were not going to do that. As an aside from that, completely separate issue, we propose as an environment working group a biodiversity policy to protect and enhance the biodiversity of this town. Yes, within that it talks about pesticides, herbicides and fungicides, but the two issues are separate for council, whether you like it or not, and I completely take that you don't, aren't responsible for the decision around whether to spray the streets of Newquay with poison. That's this committee's decision and it has been made. Full council absolutely have the right and will get to vote on whether we adopt a biodiversity policy for this town council, which will promote biodiversity in Newquay. They're two separate issues, so please don't confuse the two. We would spraying the roads of Newquay with glyphosate as a result of an agreement with Cornwall Council many years ago, before most of us were on this council. It was not an agreement made in perpetuity and could be overturned. We gave forewarning to Cornwall Council earlier this year, I think back in March, that we are looking to stop it. We stopped it and they were more than welcome to step in, even if, should they wish to do, spray glyphosate, which I know that they don't do. And in fact, at the moment, they have Biffa managing the centre of Newquay. One might argue the centre of Newquay represents less than 10% of the town. And Cornwall Council are in fact leaving the rest of Newquay's road, verges and pathways to become overgrown with vegetation. That would be, quite a reasonable thing to say. But let's not confuse the two issues. One is, should we continue to spray poison on the roads of Newquay that end up in our seas? And we agreed that that wasn't the case. The second issue is on biodiversity, which goes through GNR on the 29th and then full council on the 4th of December, is my understanding. So let's be really clear. And just to clarify, Councillor Hannon's putting words in my mouth, that's clearly not what I said. Thank you.
Can you just clarify what words I put in your mouth, Mr. Mayor? Just the words that I put in your mouth.
The words that you put in my mouth earlier on this evening. Yeah. Around just letting the weeds grow. That's essentially what you said?
The bottom line is here, Chair, that I'm not confusing the two issues. I know full well they're separate issues. I know the biodiversity is a separate issue to what this council's agreed. The point I'm trying to put across is that because that policy hasn't gone to full council, and because this committee has decided autonomously to not carry on with that contract. Having spent all that time looking for an alternative, if we honestly thought right at day one that we just didn't have a responsibility and we were just going to stop doing it, why have we spent all these meetings looking for an alternative plan that doesn't use glyphosate, which I would fully support? We failed. At the last committee meeting, we had an alternative plan. I didn't agree with the alternative plan, but at least it was a plan. And we scrapped that plan at the very last minute. We even then didn't say that we don't think it's our responsibility. If you read the minutes, we then sent the officers off to go and look for a road sweeping contract. So I get the impression, I'm not confused, all the way through this process of whether we're going to spray the curbs or not, we have always been looking for a plan B. And when we finally got a plan B, we ditched it at the last minute and came up with a plan C, which we all know full well is completely unworkable. So, no, I'm not confused, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, because it's you that's saying we don't have a responsibility, we don't have to do the curbs. That's what you're saying by not carrying that contract on. I obviously disagree with it. But you tell me what words I've put in your mouth that are not true, and then I'll answer to it.
Well, for starters, it's not the curb, it's the road. It's where the road meets the curb. It's not the curb, it's not the verge, it's not the pathways, it's where the road meets the curb. Would you also expect this council to start filling in potholes on the highway? Because that is essentially the same thing.
I think I've made my point. I think the point is that as a committee, there 4 people have made the decision to not continue with that obligation that we took on in good faith to spray whatever you want to call them, where the road meets the curbs. 4 members of the council have made that decision. That means that 16 members of the council haven't had a say in it. Well, sorry, 3 of us did, but we all voted against it. The rest of the council have done nothing.
Well, so there's actually 3 issues here, isn't there? It's a biodiversity policy. I actually, you know, I support a policy within the town which increases biodiversity. That's why we've got a verge issue, because Cornwall Council passed their pollinators policy, which was passed before I was a Cornwall councillor, pollinators policy, and it does, that pollinators policy does split people. I have to say, a lot of people just want their verges tending. A lot of people want the pollinators policy because of the bees and the butterflies. So you're never going to please all the people all the time. So a biodiversity policy is always going to do that. So let's park that one. Let's shelve that one. The second issue is the glyphosate issue. And actually, this committee agreed as a whole we wanted to move away from glyphosate. We all supported that, and we all supported a vote that went out and found an alternative. Okay, so we decided to do that. So let's shelve glyphosate a second. And the third and the final answer is, so what do we do? The third and final subject is, what do we do instead? And I was actually very pleased and surprised we found someone that was going to do it with acetic acid. Councillor Slade spent a long time convincing me that acetic acid was okay because you put it on your chips and all that sort of stuff. Fine, not a problem with that. I didn't agree with the 10%. I absolutely didn't, because I wanted to do the whole town. And I thought 10% was an arbitrary figure that didn't bear any relevance to the cost in comparison to glyphosate. So I didn't believe in 10%. But I actually wanted to see that acid, whether it worked or not. I actually wanted to see. We genuinely had an opportunity there for an option. So what I'm asking about is, you know, why did we bin that? Because it seemed we found what this whole committee wanted and was looking for, although it was 10%. So why did we bin that is my question. And the final answer is, we've got confused a bit now as a committee, as Councillor Hannan said. We've got confused between we shouldn't do anything because it's Cornwall Council's responsibility, and we should do something, and that something should be acid, or no, it's not going to be acid, it's going to be road sweeping. So the issue is, do you want us to do something or not? If not, I don't agree with it, but if that's democratic, that's a thing. But why are we still wasting officers' time again and again and again, getting them to go out and get quotes when we've said apparently that it's not our responsibility, it's Cornwall Council's responsibility? Which is it? Do you want to do something or not? If you want to do something, what do you want to do? And if you don't want to do it, why are we wasting the officers' time?
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. I don't run, I may be the chair, but I don't make decisions
Chair,
solo.
so can
Excuse me,
someone,
if I
can someone tell me, are we doing this road sweeper thing? Are we doing this road sweeper thing?
I believe that your protocol is that we're respectful to each other, if I may, please. Thank you. So I have, if you would let me speak, please. It is your turn to be quiet and listen while I gave you 3 minutes, which is the amount required. Thank you. So I speak a little more slowly, and that's my style. Thank you. So firstly, I'd just like to point out a comment that was made that was, you all supported the move away from glyphosate. I've sat through numerous meetings this year where yourself and a few other councillors tried to tell us glyphosate was harmless and of no problem and we should continue it. So I would just make a point on that note that that's an incorrect statement.
No, it's not. No, it's not, Chair. Point of order.
People can go back and watch the
There
videos.
was a unanimous vote.
Excuse me, I am speaking now.
I've got
It
a right
is
to
my
reply.
3
Point of
minutes.
order. So in
This
accordance
is
with the
my
Constitution,
reply.
I've got a right to factually correct what you say. Now, you might not agree with it, but I will say there's a named vote. There is a named vote where everyone in this council supported
Okay.
officers
So
doing
if
an
I will
alternative
clarify my
investigation
comment,
into
it is that you
glyphosate.
spoke a number of times that you tried to argue that we should allow glyphosate to continue. You may have voted differently. I don't have those records in front of me right now, but I do recall the conversations and other people can watch the videos for themselves from earlier this year if they'd like to confirm that. Secondly, in terms of the 10%, you're pushing for that right now and then saying, oh, but it should have been the whole town, and yet you've been on this committee and council long enough to know where pots of money sit, and yet no budget for that was proposed. So I think that's a bit of a shame. If you thought the whole town should have things done in a non-glyphosate way, if you're saying that you don't support the use of glyphosate and you believe other methods are more expensive, that's a bit of a shame. As I say, as was said by others and is in the minutes here and the video, well, at least for most of the meeting last time, yourself and another councillor left early, and there was a discussion, as Councillor Hannan has pointed out, and the place that landed after discussion of multiple parties was that the officer should, and if the wording is, I just had it a second ago, should look into and book for street sweeping. That was a decision made by this committee. And I know that there was an email back and forth, as I've said, and unfortunately, I don't manage the Environment Officer. I may be the chair, but I'm not actually the manager of the Environment Officer. And I know that he sends me emails back and forth, but I'm of the understanding that that hasn't been booked in line with the direction in the minutes. And I don't know exactly why that is. I'll give the Environment Officer a chance to comment.
So just a little bit of factual information on that one. We have been responding to each other correspondence-wise, and I have sent emails to yourself saying Cornwall Council already sweep for the whole of Newquay every 4 weeks. Their recommendation is we don't pay them to do their job, which is, to save us.
Read in the emails, but if that's your interpretation, that's fine.
However, they have said if there are issues, which you've responded to me, to report it through their reported function online. But they have also stated it is not a form of weed control. That's why you see these plants in the...
Obviously, clearing the gutters takes away the substrate, which the...
Okay. May I come back a second, Chair, because there's a bit of clarity. So just on the 10%, why I didn't agree with the 10% was because actually the total budget that was required to spray 10% with acid was about 50% of what the entire town glyphosate budget was, which was why there was no correlation. I wasn't proposing extra budget. I was proposing our weed killing budget be spent on it in its entirety. But anyway, we're past that. So my point is, I've still not had my question answered. Are we doing this road sweeping or not? And does this council think it should do something? Because we seem to have said we should, but in another vein, we've written to Cornwall Council and said we shouldn't.
Creek would like.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things. Thank you, Joe, for that piece of information. I would encourage everyone watching or listening to go onto Cornwall Council's website to the report it page and report any issues with the highway, include where the curb meets the the road meets the curb. I just point out that there is no item or motion here for discussion, and I believe this is correspondence.
Chair, I believe we've had a full discussion. Thank you for all the points raised. As Councillor Creek has said, any resident in Newquay can report on the Cornwall Council website if they have any concerns about the verges, the curbs. You don't need to know the difference, but essentially about overgrowth, if it was a concern where you live in Newquay, and therefore we'll move on to point 8, which is the budget for environment and facilities. Thank you. So our finance officer, would you like to thank you, Shirley, take us through this, or would you like us? No, Anne, sorry, Joe. So we have a budget here, and we're to discuss and make any recommendations. A number of us attended a budget meeting 3 hours, I think, last week, as well as many of the team. Thank you very much for taking us through it then. And we gave a lot of input in that meeting. Anne, do you have notes on that somewhere? Because when we were looking at this, when I was looking at this in recent days, some of the points maybe they hadn't reflected some of the comments made in that meeting. So that's sort of my question to you is, if we are going to get through the budget tonight, we've spent 3 hours already discussing it. So, and we've given you a lot of feedback on it. All members of this committee were invited and even asked what time would suit them to attend that meeting. And some obviously, some weren't able to make it. So what would you suggest as next steps? Because I don't believe we're even able to spend another 3 hours right now. And I don't want to, and I don't think anybody here wants to. So do you have a summary of what we actually discussed as last time, so that we could then approve this budget through this committee? Thank you.
Following on, so there was a meeting that some members were able to attend where we did go through this line by line. In previous years, we have gone through this line by line at this committee and given all members the opportunity to do that. So, that's a member decision rather than something that I feel I can recommend to you. The figures that you have in front of you are the ones that were agreed by the end of that meeting. There are a list of recommendations I have here. I can only apologise. Louise did do notes from that meeting. I have not had an opportunity to go through them following that meeting, so that is completely down to me and my time constraints, so apologies for that. I'm happy to talk through the overall decisions and comments that came out of that meeting, if that would be helpful. So that might answer some of your questions and answer any other questions that come up. Some of that can't be done in open session, but most of it probably could. But ultimately, it's down to you as members to decide whether you would like me to provide you a summary and ask questions, or whether you would like to look at it as in detail.
Sorry, if there are other things for open session to get through, and whether it makes sense with the budget. Yes, Councillor.
Can I just ask what can't be done in open session?
Yes,
because I think it's important that we do as
that's
much
fine.
as we can in open session.
I think there's some elements around the public conveniences that possibly shouldn't be discussed in open session.
So may I recommend that we move through the further points on the agenda, and then we keep the budget discussion in open session until we reach that issue, and then we close the meeting. So I'm proposing that we move the budget down to wherever the final point is that's in open session. We'll keep most of the discussion in open session, and then Anne, take your steer for when we need that final 5 minutes or whatever it is that's closed session. Thank you. So I'm proposing that. Thank you, Councillor North, for seconding all of. So I was saying we keep most. I'll say it once again, if you could please. No, I'm voting that we move the budget line further down the agenda. We get through all the other points. Then in open session, we start the budget meeting. And then in that budget point, when we reach the point that Anne recommends we close, then we close the meeting. Okay? So I propose that. Councillor North has supported. All in favour? Thank you. Okay. So that means we will move to Climate Steering Group, we've already had that point. Thank you to Shirley and the team on that tonight. We've got point 10 on other devolved open green spaces, parks, and don't believe we have any update on that this week. Is that correct? So is it
Just a catch-all item, Chair.
I'm sorry?
That's just a catch-all item.
Right, okay. So we don't need to discuss anything in that point this evening. We get some great updates from our environment team at other points, and we'll, when is our next, we have another environment committee meeting before the end of the year, is that correct?
You have one in January, that's the
Oh, in
next one.
January,
Yeah.
okay, thank you, okay. But I think, Joe, you've got a lot going on. Thank you, so, thank you. And I think you know that you can email the committee if anything else comes up. Joe, what you have given us, though, is 10.1 pop-up tender and other opportunities, some proposals here.
I'm very conscious of our time constraints, so
Yeah.
I'll just summarise it.
Okay, thank you. And these are allowed to be in open session, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, what boiled from that informal meeting was, I think, a very steer and request from yourself, Chair, to have an item on the next agenda to look at income opportunities across the council. So we've already had 2 expressions of interest in some of our sites. So South Fistral, Melissa's had interest from a market who would like to do an event there, like a market event. We've had interest from a vendor who would like to use the open space by the railway station toilet. So I'm just conscious that we're starting to filter in expressions of interest now, and there's no real strategic direction from this committee as to how you want us as officers to play this. Last year I did a pop-up tender example for South Fistral, and it was just an example, so I don't want to raise any hairs because there's no intention of me to put that out there, and that's why it's still kind of padlocked and confidential. It's just an example of what this committee could use for its sites. Commonwealth Council, as Lewis will know, do pop-up tenders for its sites, and it works quite well for them. So it's just another option for yourselves to consider. So for me, as officer for this committee, I could do with a steer as to how you want us to play this. Do you want us to just look strategically across the board at all portfolio of all your sites and put in some recommendations for each site? Do you want us to just go away and maximise the amount of income for every site and as long as we're doing our due diligence and making sure things are tendered, licensed and leased properly? What do you want us to do essentially? Because we're now getting interest and just need a steer really.
Well, great to hear about the interest. Thank you for bringing it forward. I think we all want to see council properties owned on behalf of the taxpayer utilised to the best of their potential to reduce the burden on us, all of us as taxpayers and everybody else. So keen to support this to move forward as fast as possible. And it looks as though we have Councillor North would like to say something.
So personally, I think we should do it not en masse. I think it should be each individual one. I think we need to be very careful. I know since we took over the car park at South Fistral, I know I probably have an interest, I live close to it, but for me, I've always said it's a car park, but also it's a bit of a playground. You've got the children's playground, you've got the grass car park where people go, they ride their bikes, they do all sorts of things. And what we did first say when we took ownership of that we might look at something like car boots, but in the sort of closed session, when we're providing free parking. In regards to having a pop-up, whether it's ice cream, sweets, whatever, I think it's great that we've got an area in Newquay where families can go and play in that park, take their own picnics, but they're not all the time kids saying, oh, can I have an ice cream, can I have a Mars bar, because there's a pop-up unit there. So, that's always been my voice in regards to South Fistral. And I think as a parent yourself, no matter where you go, kids always want something. But you have loads of families go up there, they take their own picnics. We've got a cafe at South Fistral, and we've got all those vans along Esplanade Road. So I think, personally, we need to look at each place individually. I think we can't do it en masse, but that's my proposal.
Thank you, Councillor North. Councillor Gardner.
I agree with an individual approach. I'm a little bit the opposite because I actually would like a concession at South Fistral Play Park. Often go there with my children. I would love to be able to sit at a picnic table and have a cup of coffee I can't do that because it's a good old hike down to Esplanade Green, perhaps, or wherever. So I share a different opinion, but I appreciate I don't live opposite. I'm a bit different with the railway station, and the reason I'm different on the railway station is, you know, ultimately it's right adjacent to a supermarket car park. But my biggest issue, I think, is that actually we've got a new business that's gone into the railway station cafe. It's not easy. I know he's not having an easy time of it, and I think it's incredibly important, that railway station cafe and that whole area actually. And I often say to Cornwall Council, and I maintain consistency across, I don't like pop-ups that directly compete with local businesses who are there all year round paying business rates and all that sort of stuff. But I do believe pop-ups can add to the vibrancy of the town. Prime example is all the boathouse and all the pop-ups down there for the summer. I think that sort of pop-up is brilliant. So I think individual propositions on individual sites is the way forward, and for councillors to tweak those pop-ups based on the individual site.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with bits of both of what you said there, actually. I think, like Councillor Gardner, I would actually quite like a cup of coffee while sat there watching my kids play on the play park for what seems like forever, without coffee, certainly. So, yes, I mean, I have to say, I would like a cup of coffee, but I completely take on board what you're saying about the ice creams and the chocolates and bits and pieces. I do agree with Councillor Gardner about the railway station site. I would like to see a pop-up there, though one that doesn't directly compete with Topher, the guy that owns the two cafes now, isn't it, in the vicinity of the station. I actually think maybe a confectionery stand or something at the site over the summer might be a good shout. But, you know, I think strategically, direction-wise, I think you're right. We absolutely want to set the strategic direction that we want to try and maximise the assets that we have from a revenue perspective, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the budget. So South Fistral, markets, boot sales, maybe a coffee pop-up, railway station, maybe a confectionist or something else, maybe a bike repair pop-up, who knows. Killer Court units, if we've got units that are vacant for a period of time, particularly over the off season, I think we've already agreed to do pop-ups in there over Christmas if we have vacant units. This site, frankly, if we've got offices that are now vacant on this site and we want some revenue opportunities, hot desking is huge. And is a great opportunity. Mount Wise Centre as well. So, this council has lots of opportunities for pop-up site revenue, and I think we should absolutely maximise that. I think you should bring your suggestion in terms of a document back to the committee for approval. But I think we'd like probably final sign-off on anything that could potentially be contentious. I think would be the way to go.
I'd like to make a proposal that we give Joe delegation to, on the railway station concession, I believe it would be discussing a potential contract there of a, maybe it's sort of a horse cart or some sort of small concession there, which does not compete, so doesn't sell coffees and hot food. So maybe they sell newspapers, as Councillor Creek said, bike repair, it could be ice blocks, and secondly, that, and I wasn't crystal clear on what you need on the next part of it, but I think we're all agreed that we'd like to see you able to move forward on the other points, although not all at once, one at a time with the committee. Thank you, Joe, and sorry, you're trying to speak.
I think that my takeaway will be to have a look across the board at your kind of the portfolio, and maybe come up with some suggestions for each site and a recommendation for each site, so whether it be a pop-up tender, whether it be something else. The only issue that we'll have with the railway station is the fact that the access is via the Asda car park. So you've got the AMPR camera, which actually tracks any kind of traffic coming onto that site. So it's a hurdle that Dan overcame with his team in that we have a arrangement with ASDA. Whether they would extend that to someone that we appoint as part of a popular tender exercise, I couldn't say for sure. So it's not insurmountable, but I just need to make you aware that I couldn't just necessarily put out an expression of interest and hope that that would go forward without it.
Okay, yeah, I think what you were after, really, rather than a proposal or anything, was a steer from this committee to say, go and do it this way, and that's basically said that on an individual basis, but go out and find as much money-making opportunities as we can. Pretty much. Is that right? What did you say?
I think we're also getting a strong steer from this committee that we don't want them to compete, especially with a new business right next to, and you know, possibly with ASDA as well. Although I would make the case to ASDA that us having a small business in that very empty space, you know, would probably help with safety a bit and, you know, preventing kind of vandalism that may be impacting their, the security of their car park as well. Councillor Creek.
Yeah, it was just a point of clarification on the Killer Court units. We did agree that, didn't we, in terms of pop-ups for the Killer Court? And have we got anywhere with it in terms of, I'm conscious that in, what, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, we've got a Christmas market, and actually over that weekend, you know, for the period of the 6 or 7 weeks up to Christmas, we'd get someone in there. You know, that I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the issue of fairness, really, in that these spaces, in my opinion, ought to be a council decision to let them, and then those spaces be advertised so that there is a fairness against who goes in each space rather than just an expression of an interest.
So what else do you need from us, Joe? I'm wondering if sort of a one page from you which says, these are the first 3 sites that we've already had interest in. I'm going to work with Sally to advertise them. You know, you've given us draft forms there. You might have an idea of, as you just said, some of the risks or issues or things to overcome, and just any other points like that for councillors to be aware. Thank you.
Ideally, yeah. I mean, you've given me plenty, all I need really. So I don't really want to take too much more time on this. It's more just, rather than just having these expressions of interest and them just sitting there, at least having an awareness that you do want to at least entertain something is useful to me. So no, that's fine. I'll work on some sort of one-page document if I can, and we'll take it from there.
If there is interest in a few places, I agree with our finance officer, and that I would like it to, you know, anybody in town to be able to apply. But I don't want you to be overburdened with sort of 10 places. You've got to steer on at least one for now, maybe 2 or 3, and just work on that to start with.
Just on that point, we did advise, or I asked Jacob to advise the people that have expressed interest that it won't just be a case of you put in your expression of interest and that will be just considered. I mean, the first step would be for this committee to even agree that you want a concession in that space. That would be the first step. Second step would be a pop-up tender exercise, which is similar to what Cornwall Council do. So it's a open and transparent and advertised process. So just for clarity.
I'd just like to repeat the motion then, which was a proposal, sorry, that we do give you steer to market the railway station one with very clear wording that what they offer should not be in conflict with the cafe, so not coffees and hot food, whoever bid for that space. And then secondly, as you've pointed out, you'd need to sort of work with the party to check in with ASDA as to whether they're going to allow a vehicle into the space or how to get around that.
This is like a steer.
So you don't want us to vote on that? Okay. Well, I hope that does move forward then on the railway station one. Thank you. Great. Thank you. Okay, great. So point 11 on the agenda was Environment Working Party reports. Joe, I'm wondering if this is old wording here on the establishment, because we did that a while ago, I think. So, so I don't think we need to establish another Environment Working Party. we have an environment and climate working party, and the main point there was looking at the glyphosate issue this year. We've just had a huge conversation on that, and we've also worked through the solar panels point with the team over recent months. So thanks to everybody who's been involved in that. So point 12 is the Nuki and Bloom report. I didn't see anything in here, and we don't have Councillor Thompson here. Councillor Hannan, thank you.
I only want to ask a question on behalf of Nuki and Bloom because it does keep coming up, and it's only the last little bit on their minutes. You'll see that they're amongst their projects in front of the council office is one of them, and it was just an update really because there's obviously there's a drain issue stopping them, and I don't want this to be they're pressing on with all their other projects. It'd be ironic if the council one is the one that's holding them up. So just so I can feed back to them how it's progressing, the drain issue.
Yeah, so apologies, Councillor Hannan. I responded to Councillor Thompson's inquiry on the same subject, but I didn't copy in. So essentially, I was delegated to get a drain survey undertaken for Marcus Hill just to determine what's actually going on in there. Dan then took that over and got Aquarod in. They are still yet to produce their report, but their initial findings, and I'm hoping that it rings true, is that the damage is not on the town council side of the boundary, and I've relayed that to Councillor Thompson. So we are still waiting for the full report, and Dan has already put motions in play with South West Water and lodged it as works for them, because they would need to do their own assessment anyway. They're unlikely to take our word for it. However, we will have a report, hopefully, that will back up our what we've got. So fingers crossed, and it's too early to say, but I'm hoping that that necessarily won't be an issue for us. What I did advise Councillor Thompson is the manhole still needs repair, and that's always been the case. So the only thing that I asked Councillor Thompson to make sure in the plans is there is at least access still to the basement and to that manhole. So within any planting plans, can we just ensure that we've got maintenance access? So that's the only thing I flagged up to her.
You have received that, I presume, through.
What I would say in future, if it's not confidential, I would just copy the chair in of Bloom as well. Because although Councillor Thompson's very hands-on, they have Bloom go out twice a week. And they'll be up to date more frequently, just in case. But.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Joe, and to Dan and the facilities team as well on that. So the next point on the agenda was town decorations, and we have a document here with a quote for Universal Column Fastener.
I'll try and simplify this because it won't make any sense to anyone. So our Christmas lights, most of them are on pole mounts, and what I mean by that is they're on lampposts. So each lamppost needs to have some brackets on it to fit the motif. They're coming up to 5 years old now, so Blashare have advised that for the next coming season, not this season, but the coming season after, it'd be worthwhile renewing our brackets so they're hopefully capable for the next 5 years. So my recommendation is to purchase the requested brackets, and what Blashare will do, subject to your approval, is when the Christmas lights go down, they'll then swap over the brackets. So then next year, there'll be new brackets that they're fitted onto. So it is quite as boring as that, I'm afraid.
Was there a budget line associated with this?
There's a budget line of 5,000 in the maintenance, repairs and renewals. I'm conscious that you've...
For the Christmas lights?
Yeah, you'll have actuals in there for Christmas lights upgrades, but that's coming from your EMR. So from my mind, you've still got your 5,000. But Anne can correct me if I'm wrong.
And we've already approved the upgrades coming from the EMR. Okay. So we're saying we've got availability in the Christmas lights budget to do this sort of maintenance, and that line was exactly for, is that people's understanding?
If they're going to be changing the brackets when they do the changeover, there's no labour cost then, is there? It's just going to be, because they're going to be up there anyway, aren't they?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So Exactly, and I'm conscious that we could be seeing some inflation on things within the coming year. So yes, Councillor Gardner, any other thoughts?
I've got a question, and it's on the EMRs, because I'm just looking at the lights EMR in the budget. We've got a committed future expenditure from the lights EMR, 5,270. What's that? Is that, or is that?
That was previously approved, so that was the upgrades to the power supplies that was approved a couple of months ago. So I identified quite a while ago that some of these power supplies, they haven't had upgraded components in quite some time. So the purpose of that upgrade work was to install new RCBs, move fuses, so the direct power supply isn't coming straight into yeah, I'm not an electrician, but essentially it's separate to this, Councillor Gardner.
Okay, thanks.
So I suppose I'm just going to put a slight damper on the polls. If they're going to put them up when they take these ones down, and you're saying they last 5 years, they're going to be a year there with doing nothing with them, why would we not put them up next year? You know, this time next year. That's all I'm thinking. I wouldn't buy something at home for next year if I had a 5-year span on it, because I've lost a year already. That's just a thought.
No, it's a fair point. I mean, I think we're stuck between that aspect and potentially having to pay labour next year and maybe increased cost of these goods, possibly. Yeah. Councillor Hannan, so.
Why don't we just buy them this year and then put them somewhere and then just fit them next year?
Do you know if we have to pay labour costs? You're not sure.
I mean, if we buy them this year and store them here, then yeah, but if we store them here, then they wouldn't necessarily be out in the elements getting weathered.
Okay. Well.
Sorry about that.
No,
I just feel
thank you.
I have to say it.
I think we should be discussing all the aspects of, it's £1,200 and we actually sort of weren't necessarily expecting it. And we should be very careful how we spend these. So, but as I say, my worry is that the cost would increase if we didn't at least purchase now, although I think we're all agreed that the weathering is a real risk and an issue. So, and we did know that the sort of thing at least, there was a budget line because our council staff have had to manage putting up Christmas decorations and pieces over the years, lights. Thank you. So I would propose that we do approve this because it sounds as though they're needed, and with a caveat that, Joe, if the provider said that no, they're going to wear within, whilst not being out in the elements, then you brought it back to the committee. Would anybody like to second that? I'm trying to get around all those risks there, or some of them.
Apologies, Chair, can you just repeat that? I was a bit lost
Yeah,
there.
sure, my apologies. So I'm proposing that we approve the spend on the column fasteners for the Christmas lights, and that Joe, if he asked the spender and they said, no, if you store them, they're still going to have 1 year's worth of deterioration, then you'll come back to us and we'll push it out to a purchase next year. Does that sound fair, Joe?
You could do that. I mean, it could give delegated authority to myself and a couple of members to make the final call on it.
Okay.
Just so.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
just
to
taking
take
into
Councillor
account
North's
that point.
I mean, it might just be a case that we purchase them and keep them in storage here, and then when Blair come to erect them in the following year, they just collect them. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
And therefore, that we approve with that delegated authority for your decision making around any risks. Seconded by Councillor Slade. All in favour? Okay, thank you, everybody. Great. Okay, so. Yes. Or yes. So we're moving the budget up to the last point. So if was any other business is before the last point. So is there any other quick business anybody wants to raise before we discuss the budget? No? Okay, great. So good. Let's have the budget discussion. So actually, Anne, I've realised on the budget, it would be helpful for me if you could clarify for me, the two different budgets you've presented to us and the distinction between them, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so you've got 3 documents. The first is your EMR balances, which obviously is where you are at the current time. Your second one is the budget for next year, which we have been through in detail. No, that's the other one. That one there. Yeah. And the final one is where you are so far this year. Okay. Which is just for information, really. One of the things, the first document we got is the EMRs. I sort of harped on quite a lot in the meeting about the fact that the level of the EMRs for this committee are much, much lower than they have been in previous years. Lots of the reserves have been seriously depleted, especially the public conveniences one, and that really it would be a good idea for these to start to be increased and replenished. However, there was some recommendations towards the end of the meeting that we would review what happened with the second home tax. I've got that information now, which will be going out to GNR soon, that we might be able to use some of that money funding to top up our reserves this year. But this is just for your information on where you are with the levels of the reserves that you currently hold, because there seems to be a tendency in terms of, because we haven't got a 5-year plan, and we will be getting there following all of the work that the council are doing at the current time with your objectives and everything else and your corporate plan, that there's a lot of expenditure that comes up that you're not expecting or isn't budgeted for because we're not thinking far enough ahead. And ideally, your EMR should be for large projects that are coming up. They shouldn't be for all the unknowns. You should be more aware of what's coming up. And once we've got proper schedules in place and everything, hopefully that will be more where you're moving towards. So anyway, that's that. The second document, which is the one that we went through line by line, if I go through what we talked about as an overview, and then if anyone has any questions, if that's the way you're happy to play it, then I'll do that. So I'm just going to go through my notes of the meeting in terms of what sort of recommendations were to come back to this committee and things that were discussed in terms of ideas and recommendations. So obviously we went through this line by line, and there were a few adjustments made to the first version that went out to members, and this is the most current up to date. The first thing that was discussed was sponsorship at the skate park as an income generator for the committee to consider at some time in the future. So that was something that was considered an idea as an income generation. Most of these things are income generation ideas that there aren't any actual money in the budget, income figures, because they're initial ideas for this committee to consider going forward. So hopefully which would help a budget going forward. There was a request for a list of all the paths to be circulated to the ENF members and put on the website. So, because there was some confusion around which paths we maintained and which ones we didn't. So that was something else that was discussed. We talked around play areas, and it was agreed that the Mount Wise Gardens was the focus for the play area for coming year and going forward, but it was requested that Kieran, if anything comes up, that he would investigate grants for the replacement and enhancement of any play equipment down at South Fistral play area, or whether there be other opportunities that arrive through grant funding that could use that space, whether it be an outdoor gym, lots of different things. If there are opportunities come up, that would be one of his highlighted areas that the council would like him to investigate. There was discussions around the usage of the public conveniences, and it was decided to put footfall counters on the free of charge toilets so that you had some actual figures of usage of the various toilets going forward for consideration with any conversations that may come up in the future. And that was, I think there was only two, is it Porth and Esplanade? I've got those written down.
No. No, not yet. I've got a cost together for the footfall counters, so it's just a matter of ordering them, which I shall hopefully be able to do tomorrow.
Why do we need footfall counters? Surely, income divided by 50p gives you the number of people that pay.
I mean, that would be the case if we charge for them. But we don't charge for Porth, we don't charge for Esplanade. Therefore, we don't know how many people use the toilets that we don't charge for.
These are the free of charge toilets.
Okay, so how much are the footfall counts? Roughly, big
A
handfuls?
couple of £100.
Right, okay.
So the next thing was the review of the pop-up sites around the town and consider them, which has already been popped on the agenda and you're going with. The second was just a note about benches. There was one in last year and one in this year, and we had thought they were both in this year, so that was just something. There was a discussion around charging the facilities vehicles up at Mount Wise Centre rather than down here, because there was an element of these what they call charging units need to be replaced, and rather than replacing them, we've got ones that work up at the Mount Wise Centre, and we'll have solar. So there was a discussion around that. There was this discussion about the rent for the registrar's office, and that is being progressed at the moment. There was a request for reviewing the usage of upstairs building following after it's actually vacant, because it's still progressing through the lease phase, so to review that. There was an element to look at any energy reduction that could be looked at for this building, as well as the Mount Wise Centre, which has already been done by the solar panels. That costing had been included already in the budget, which is what we didn't think it had originally. So I wanted to clarify that. There was discussions around there being a working party for this property to look at the usage and any income as well. So I believe there was a working party, and it would be whether that working party continued or whether there'd be new members to look at how and what happens to this building going forward. There was a discussion about reviewing the leases and ensuring that the usage and all the recharges are provided going forward, which is what's happening now with all of the tenants, so that's good. Okay. There was an element, and I can't remember what this relates to. There was a quote, sorry Joe, this is going to, Joe A. There was a discussion around when we were talking through the services about something that you had provided, but they wanted a quote for the man time for making sure. So what they were talking about, no, this was to do with the fact that I think that we were looking at doing additional sites, and they were asking how much you needed as a team, manpower wise, to do everything that they wanted to do without a reduction in service.
That was the weeds removal plants, yeah.
Okay.
So I think that would be looked at with the staff review.
Yeah. I didn't put what it was for, so I was trying to, thank you. There was a discussion around offering Wi-Fi to the public on the Killer Court, and whether that would be possible. There was a discussion around the SLA for harbour toilets, and just to clarify when that ends, and Joe, I think you had gone by that point, I haven't asked you that question, so that was just something I need to come back to. And then there was questions around reviewing the opening times of the toilets, summer hours, winter hours, opening times, whether there were any commercial opportunities available. There was discussions around the phase 2 at Tren Creek, or the phase 2 land at Tren Creek allotments being made available to the Climate Action Group to as sort of one of their projects.
The other point there was just the allotments are pretty much now available, Joe. Or, sorry, you were saying becoming available very soon, and therefore there'll be that income which wasn't factored into the budget earlier. So, yeah, and you've had that budget approved, I think, for that.
I'm not sure about the budget approved, but there are budget lines in here that we could potentially use from this year that we can speed up that process.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Hans.
There was discussion about involving different events to link in with external events, so that there was some of our events link in with external events, so we don't have to do quite so much to provide a big event. So there was a linkage with external event companies. And the final point I've got is look at the environment team working with the facilities team to not refurbish but spruce up the public conveniences.
Which we already do.
Yeah, great. That's easy.
Budget line,
Yeah.
that we were trying to understand
Yeah.
the budget line.
So
Yeah,
that's-
thank you. No, I agree. It wasn't a new project or anything. It was just what's ongoingly done by both the teams. Yeah, thank you. No, that's fine. There was a lot in there. It was 3 hours. So, Anne, thank you so much for capturing so much. And my understanding is that really in a summary, we can have a discussion in a moment, but the summary is that you would like us as a committee to approve this budget or whatever edits need to be made in this meeting, and then that will go to full council for the full council budget approval. Is that correct?
So what will happen next is this budget, after discussions, any tweaks that you might wish to make this evening, will go to GNR in a
Okay,
couple of
sorry.
weeks. Then that will go to full council unless GNR decide that there needs to be some more movement, at which point there would have to be an emergency ENF committee meeting called in December, purely for budgets, which would then go to GNR and full council in January for approval.
Thank you. I think it's really good that everybody, all of us are on the same page about that timing. Thank you. I think Councillor Creek had his hand up first, then Councillor Garden. No.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Anne. Comprehensive note-taking there. Well done. I think you covered most of what we talked about. So, EMRs. Sorry. Let's start with the total over and under on this, which is proposing 100 and odd, almost £110,000 increase on the budget for next year versus this year. I don't know how others feel about that, but that doesn't feel particularly palatable to me. We've worked really hard to be fiscally prudent on this financial year and have been, and it would be a shame to then see the budget go up by almost 25% for next year. So let's go through this, a couple of bits and pieces where I see there's opportunities. We already talked about EMR transfers, of which there is an opportunity around 61,500. My understanding from the information that you and the clerk have got is that we could look to use about 30% of what we project the second home tax to be next year, using it as a dividend rather than relying it on as recurrent funding, because there are loopholes within that particular piece of legislation locally, and people are likely to manipulate that, and that has been seen in other parts of the country where this has happened. And what's happened is councils have gone, whoa, we've got all this extra money this year from second home tax, brilliant, of course, and then everyone works out what the loopholes are, and then next year there's a massive black hole because we thought it was recurrent funding and it isn't. So I would propose that we don't do that, and in fact utilise it as a dividend, and then if we get it or a portion of it next year, then we can have that discussion at that point. So I estimate around 30% of that for the EMR. So that's 61 and change off of the 110 deficit. I note that we've got 70% tenancy on our units at Killer Court. Certainly in the last 12 months, we've never got to 70% for the whole 12 months. We might have at points. I think that's quite pessimistic. And I know that you are naturally pessimistic, but I'd like to see that occupancy percentage up towards 85%. We might have a couple of units available right now, but Councillor North and I work hard to make sure that they are full and that people ideally pay a full year's up front so that we benefit from that as quickly as possible and don't get into any financial troubles that we had in the past. And we've actually got a meeting on Friday, I believe, with 2 prospective tenants. So if we get up the percentage of that to 85% and the same at Mount Wise, although I think we're already over 85% at the moment and have been for the last 12 months. Working party for maximising Marcus Hill, absolutely. We've got the property redevelopment working party, which I would propose that we just wrap up into doing that. We talked at length in the meeting about the electric for this site and for the library coming in at circa 40 grand a year. And we talked about actually that is crazy. And we know that this isn't an efficient building and some of that is probably why these air conditioning units are probably the other main cause of that. And actually we're going to have to do some renovations to the roof of the library. And at the same time, let's put in solar and battery storage for the supply of electric to both of these sites. That will come in at less than what we are currently paying on an annual basis for electric. And so we talked about using the budget for those 2 lines as a sort of a internal loan back to ourselves in year to pay for that. And we'll see those benefits in year clearly. The sooner we do it, the better. Other things we talked about, and again on the pessimistic side, South Fistral car park. I note that despite the fact that from the great work of this committee and the council staff, and thanks to partners like Nuki Radio for advertising, we've increased South Fistral car parking revenue by 20% year on year for the last 2 years. And we've not reviewed the fees on that car park for over 2 years in terms of any increases that might be warranted there. And certainly since we agreed those fees, which were 20%, I believe I suggested we set them 20% below Cornwall Council at the time, and Cornwall Council have increased their fees during that period at least once, possibly twice, to my knowledge. And so there's your pessimistic view of it being the same next year and the year after as it is this year, despite the last 2 years of growth, seem a very pessimistic. And I would suggest we likewise put 20% growth on that fee for the next 3 years. Other areas, toilets, and this is a tricky one because, of course, only a portion of what the toilets costs us is on this budget, because there is a portion in the staff budget that sits with GNR, I believe. But the over and under on toilets for next year is looking like, just take a breath, guys, £500,000 to provide public facilities for the community, but largely used by tourists. That feels uncomfortable to me, and I know that we are spending way too much on public conveniences. I'd like to see a strategic direction of this council working with the officers for next year across both the ENF and GNR budget for toilets, so the overall £500,000 budget, to reduce that by 10% next year, which is £50,000. The way that we can look at that is around optimisation and efficiencies in all parts of how we deliver public conveniences in this town. Footfall counters are obviously really important. Procurement's really important. How we staff them is really important. We paid security this year to lock them and unlock them without any cleaning. That doesn't seem very efficient to me. I think we spend £1,000 a month on toilet roll. That doesn't seem particularly efficient, but I'll happy to be told otherwise. But I think we should budget for a 10% reduction based on what we are projecting for next year, which will still take us, I believe, over what we've actually spent this year. And that is essentially all the bits on the budget that that I'd like changed, if that's okay.
Sorry.
Councillor Creek stole some of my thunder because I actually agree with it, but here we go. Right, some questions, some points I'm going to make. So, first page, line 40, line 254, weed control. Why have we got a budget in for weed control if we're not going to do it? Then
Just on that one, we agreed to change it to Town Enhancement Fund at the meeting.
Right, fine. That's not what it says. The next one is the South Fistral car park and play area. Budget uplift overall of 50%. Why? 13,633. It's line 123 up to 19,319. Seems there's a whole lot of costs coming in. Why? Mount Wise Gardens, is £1,000 enough? Now, bear in mind that Cornwall Council are going to require a full maintenance plan for that before they devolve it. So I would question, is it enough? You've got the library building, maintenance, repairs and renewal going up from 3,531 to £10,000. Why? Okay, capital purchases going up from £0 to £15,000. So which one it is in? You can't split it across two budget lines. It's in one or the other. So that would be my point there. Big one, council offices, rental income going down from £12,860 to one. We need to do something about that. Huge income drop that needs to be addressed. However, there's an overhead. There's 10% increase on overheads. Why is that the case? Inflation's not a 10%. So there's a big question there. Mount Wise Centre, it's good that we've got an income, but my general point about Mount Wise Centre is, I think almost a year ago now, there was a recommendation from this committee to GNR to have a full report on Mount Wise with options, including disposal as an option. Has that report been commissioned? Has it not? Where are we on that? So it's good we've got an increase of £12,000, but it's still costing us £500 a week to run, to operate that building. Killer Court units, still no service charge. Why not? Is service charge in the rent? Why do we still not have a service charge? We're supposed to do that after the first few months. Okay, if it's somewhere in the rent, then service charge line needs to come out because we can't keep showing it as zero. Why are we putting in £3,000 for temporary toilets? What's the forecast for those temporary toilets? Big one about the toilets income. Every single toilet, with the exception of Watergate Bay, is down on income between 23-24 now. The thing we've changed there is we put the fees up to 50p from 20p. I asked for a review of that to actually see the impact. Now, there are other factors at play. I'm not saying it's totally down to that. We know footfall's down about 10%, for example.
You know these numbers are the pre-summer numbers, right?
Well, I'm looking at the 23-24 actual, and then the year-end forecast for 24-25, which I'm assuming is a direct correlation.
The actuals here are to the end of July.
No, 23-24 actual, which will have ended at April 24.
The report recently showing us that all the contactless toilets were up.
Okay, I can only say what's in front of me. And the figures that are in front of me show that, for example, in 23-24, Trenance Gardens toilet took £1,836. That's
ask for a clarification from the finance
That's what.
officer on
Can I
this?
just finish
Okay.
my example?
Yeah.
That's what it took. The year-end forecast is zero this year, but we're only forecasting 1,500. But for example, each one of that is down. And if I can just finish that point. So, are the toilets making more or less money than they were in financial year 23-24? Because that's a big question. Because actually, if by putting up the fees, we've caused income to go down, then that needs to be addressed. Car park, yeah, I mean, I think the original vote, I'd have to go back and check the original vote, was to keep it 20% below Cornwall Council's. Cornwall Council have definitely put theirs up a couple of times, so that needs to probably be readdressed. My other point is grant funding. SPF was renewed in the budget 2 weeks ago, so what are we going to bid for from SPF? Grant officer's been in place for a number of months now. Have we got grants ready to go? If not, why not? Bear in mind, you cannot use SPF grant funding for play parks. And if that's the only thing we've got, that's disappointing, because that's 4 years of SPF funding this council's missed out on. And it's the only council with a population of more than 20,000 people that hasn't received any SPF funding. The reserves, I agree the reserves are down. The figure that jumps out at me is the utility figure, £70,709. That was only allowed to get so high, I believe, because we were frightened over rises in the utility bills when inflation was going absolutely crazy. Before that, it was down at sort of 27,000. So I would propose we move £50,000 of that EMR into the toilets EMR. And finally, I totally agree, we've got a 27, so just what we're proposing at the moment is a 27.2% rise or 27.2% pressure on the precept, because 27.2% is the difference between the two net income over expenditure figures. So that would be a 27.2% rise this year, a 7.4% rise next year, and a 5.7% rise the year after. I definitely cannot vote for an extra 27.2% pressure on the overall precept. If that is the case, we need to get into this again, line by line, and make some savings or increase some incomes, because the income is down by 80 odd thousand pounds across the thing, and
thank you, Councillor
so that's where I
Gardner. It's easily in 3 minutes. Thank you. So on that final point, I also don't want to see the precept increased by 27% from this committee or the council, and that's why we spent well over 3 hours going through this budget. I think it was last week, and many of the staff here, and thank you to them for all of that, in which they actually answered a lot of the points that you've raised. Just one of them that I will ask you on is the FPF. You're saying, what are we going to bid for? I haven't seen an email come around to councillors about that. If you think we should be applying for that, I would encourage you to please let us know about that. Thank you.
It's not open yet. It was announced by the Chancellor in the budget. SPF
Right.
will be renewed for a fourth
at
year.
the point that it's relevant for the council to take action.
I'm telling you now, you need to take action. It's going to open in 2 weeks. If you're not
Thank
ready to
you.
go, it's only going to be open for 6 weeks.
Thank you. Again, I would hope that if there is a mechanism by which we're all supposed to understand and work together as a committee to make that application, that we are informed about that by someone who knows about it, which as our Cornwall councillor, I hope you would do, please. Thank you. On the other points, I've captured all of them. I noted, Anne, there you were scribbling away diligently. Thank you so much. I think we probably, Councillor Creek had actually discussed a couple of them. We also agree and had discussed at length in the 3-hour meeting points you'd raised, Councillor Gardner, on income raising in certain areas, and you've heard our Finance Officer Anne making a point about actual decisions that were made in that meeting to get on with some of that work, and some of the team are doing good work on that, and Joe's just presented an hour or so ago about some of that. And there was significant discussion on the income around toilets, and some detail provided by Anne, and car parks. So, Anne, I'll let you take it further on the details, but just to help you out, I've noted 15 points here. if you'd missed any of them, trying to keep up there. But as I say, I think we'd actually discussed all of them in that meeting, but thank you if you felt it was worth going through them again. But in summary, I'd just say quickly that I think Councillor Creek has actually presented a moment ago significant areas for saving, and which I hope that you captured, which I believe would mean that we would not need to increase by the 27% on this committee. But nevertheless, if you wanted to discuss any of the points Councillor Gardner's raised in detail that weren't by Councillor Creek, then that would be great. Thank you.
I think that if you want to amend this budget, I need to go through the lines you've highlighted and amend them so that you have a figure that can be recommended to committee.
Exactly, and my apologies, I had sort of presumed that was what the last meeting was about, the 3 hours spent by yourselves and many of us to do that, to go through line by line and make suggestions on savings. But it's great that we've had these summaries from two councillors on a number of areas, which it sounds like we're all aligned. present both income increase areas for the council to raise money based on taxpayer-owned premises, and secondly for savings in areas as well.
Yeah, one of my questions was to GNR, and obviously there are 4 members of GNR here. Has that report on Mount Wise been commissioned?
So there was a discussion in GNR, and I believe there was a discussion in GNR, and there's a number of people who are not here who are on GNR, and they'd agreed that it should move to another step. And I'm trying to recall exactly what it was, but there was some discussion about why they didn't think a certain sort of expensive assessment process should be gone through. Councillor Creek, thank you.
Yeah, so to be really clear, there was never any request for a formal report. There was a request to look at the utilisation of Mount Wise and the cost to the taxpayer. And I believe we fed back to the last ENF meeting in terms of our ambition, and I believe we've already started on that journey. I realise. Hang on, let me just finish. No, let me.
Correct.
No,
You're not correct. There was a correct formal report.
Let me finish.
I proposed it.
Let me finish what I'm saying. I believe we've already got some new utilisation of the ground floor. Certainly the veterans group, who I've been in contact with in the last couple of weeks, were chatting to me about that. And so it was decided that if it was going to be a cost to the taxpayer, that it should be beneficial to the taxpayer as it wasn't before. We've actually reduced the cost of the Mount Wise Centre significantly this year versus last year, and we will continue to promote the space and then review after the next council in terms of the next council term, in terms of what we want to do with that site if it isn't working for the taxpayers as we suggested. Because I think we all agreed that we were happy to bear the cost of the site if it was of community benefit. And I believe you said that as well, Councillor Gardner. So that's where we are with that. Just a point, and the actual point I wanted to make was, and on all of these, I've obviously highlighted, I think, looking at the numbers, somewhere in the region of £130,000 to £150,000 change in the budget for next year, both in terms of revenue increases and in terms of reductions in outgoings. Do we need to do anything with that, or will you update that before you send it to GNR? Do we need to do a vote on that? Do we need to recommend that?
I think you need to go through each of the lines you've highlighted. Yeah. Right.
Just quickly, if we're going to, I think, yeah, good, but the time we're going to need to go through line by line is we're going to need to extend.
We're at 5 to 9, sorry.
Till 15:15. Shouldn't take long, we're all in agreement, aren't we?
Okay.
All right, 15:30.
So I'm making a proposal that we extend it till, what was it? 9. Second, or you're making the proposal.
I've proposed it, yeah.
I'll second it, sorry. All in favour?
Okay,
thank you. Okay.
Good.
Councillor Gardner and
yeah, can I just come back? 100%, there was definitely a formal recommendation for a written report. I asked for it, I proposed it, I think it was unanimous, but I'm not sure. I will go back and check, and I will copy everyone in on that.
Great.
Now, I haven't got a problem if GNR have discussed it and decided not to, because it's their right. The reason it went to GNR and how I know it was a request for a formal report was because GNR have the budget to commission formal reports. That's why I proposed it when it went to that. So that's fine. I absolutely agree. We have increased the income and it is used more. I know the Veterans Group very well. It was me that gave them the money to pay this town council for the rent for that space. But the issue I've got is it's still costing us £500 a week. Now, it was costing us £1,000 a week, so well done for getting that down, but we still need to get it down further because it's still costing us. And I absolutely do recall, and I still agree, if the community usage is up, then I may be less inclined to go, it's an issue, but I'm still in the point in my mind where it is an issue and it needs addressing. If GNR have decided not to do it, that's fine.
Yeah. My recollection of GNR is significant discussions on various ways to move forward with the team, with good input from our staff team on what they were recommending as well, and some significant discussion around utilising and trying to get as much revenue in. And I believe that 500 may already be starting to come down. We're quite conscious that. But there was also, as Councillor Creek has said, and he's sort of indicated that you've supported in the past, Councillor Gardner, is that where there are very small community organisations, there were some emails about this with councillors as well, that the purpose of that building is to support the community in Newquay as well. So there's, getting it down from 500 a week, absolutely everybody wants to do, but that may mean at the in the long run, there's a little bit of a cost to the council to provide that space for the community. So we need to go through line by line, was I think the discussion. Councillor North, sorry.
I mean, a couple of things. Mount-wise, we did try and increase, the rent, but we were restricted on how much. I mean, I remember at the meeting sitting here saying 10%, we were happy with that, but we couldn't do that. So we can only incrementally do the rent at, I'm not sure, because pardon?
When they renew.
Yeah.
When the 5-year contract is up, that's when you can,
But we couldn't do a huge increase.
You could do no increase.
And I know it's very minuscule, you're talking like big numbers here, but Killicourt, renting out the space, the big market or the little market, whatever they're called, they rent that from us, and I don't think they pay enough money, because they then charge each of the units on there. So they are a business making money, and I think we need to look at that, because there's been how many big markets or little markets?
Is that a GNR point, Councillor North? In which case...
It's here on your budget here.
Okay,
so that's why
sorry.
I'm just asking.
Okay.
I know it's not.
So we've got.
Pennies make pounds. It's not.
No, we all agree that we want
truth,
revenue increase.
They are making money.
So can I ask you to raise that when we get to that line? It's 9 o'clock.
I've lost it by then.
I believe everybody would like to be finished by 9:30. And if we've already discussed a lot of the points, there's actually a lot of agreement on what needs to happen. It's just that Anne wanted a bit more clarity on which lines we were talking about exactly.
Right.
And Councillor Creek has his hand up.
So do you want me to do a vote per line or?
Well, you tell me if I missed some.
Okay.
All right, so very down at the very bottom, I've taken out 30% of the EMR transfers.
No, take out all the EMR transfers and put them into that represents 30% of the total of the second home tax for this year.
I think that's a GNR decision.
Happy to recommend it to GNR.
Okay, but it's
Can I just make a comment on that one? Because I'm going through the Cornwall Council as well. For me personally, I'm at the stage where I wouldn't put, and this is just how I feel, there are so many loopholes in the second home stuff. If you put your phone on the market, if you rent it out, if you just advertise it, there are so many ways to get around it. I don't know how much I feel comfortable putting in, into a budget. And I totally get your point, Councillor Creek, about not relying on it for income, obviously taking it as a dividend. But I think the RFO is obviously uncomfortable. Am I getting that?
Yeah. So, okay. So I haven't told GNR this yet, but with the second homes things, you're looking at around, I reckon, 200,000. Okay. Now you could put all of that, as far as I'm concerned, in your EMRs. But what you can't do is take it out, everything out of your EMR transfers. You need to, from next year going forward and this year, have money going into an EMRs to keep them at a sustainable level that you can use. If you take 60 grand out of here, I'm going to have to put it back in next year. You need to have them. So what you can do with your windfall, as you want, as most people call it, that should be bringing your EMRs up to where they should be reasonably, but you are still going to use them going forward until you have your plan and you know where you are going. And even when you have your plan, you're going to have projects that you are going to want to put money into your EMRs. So your EMR transfers should be smaller going forward, but you will still always need them. So to take them out completely, for me, is a no-no.
So this committee represents, other than GNR because of the staff, the largest single spend of any committee on the council. It also has the most and largest EMRs, and likely the most and largest EMR spend. So I cannot see a good justification for not wanting to take at least 30% of what we get in that dividend this year for this committee's EMRs, because we've spent so much in the EMRs this year. And I think that's a lesson, that, it obviously needs to be repeated for before we go into next year. But ultimately, I don't see any good reason why we can't take, and I understand what you're saying about next year, and obviously we will need to monitor the situation for next year and make a decision as to what we do with that next year. And even if, if second homes reduced by 50%, I believe there's 600 in Newquay this year. Even if that reduces to 300 next year, we can have a conversation next year about what that looks like from an EMR perspective. But this is the single committee that will spend the most money on EMRs and has the most EMRs. So I see no good reason not to take 30% of that dividend this year and save the taxpayers 60 grand, to be honest.
I mean, if you look at what you've spent so far in this financial year on EMRs from this committee only,
very much aware,
you have spent and committed over £115,000.
Though some of that is historic, isn't it? So like surf statue.
Yeah, 20 grand of that is historic. Yeah. But the rest isn't. And you've got other projects that you're wanting, that you are going to use this money for, such as the library roof, which is not going to be cheap. And my point is that I believe to take all of the money out of that is not a sensible move, because, like Councillor Gardner said, we've been at a meeting with Cornwall Council and there are numerous ways out of that second home tax. And just sitting in a meeting, I can name 3 or 4 of how to do it just off the top of my head. So it really, and we don't know what's going to happen going forward, but I would say most people that have second homes have tax advisors, etc. And that this might be a one-off thing only for the council. And I feel that it's not very sensible to cut it this year to then have to put it back in next year. If that's £60,000, that's 10% on your budget. So, are you prepared to cut it this year to make next year potentially that 10%? Why don't you just lower it to a reasonable level, which is where it can continue without any further impact on the budget going forward, because it's already in there, it's not another increase.
Happy to open it to the committee. My feeling is we should do 30%. But
I'd like to propose that everybody gets a chance to mull this over, because there's a lot in what's just been discussed. And we go through the other budget lines and come back to that. It is at the end of the budget there. So be in context then for everything else. So, and if you were going to, okay, thank you.
The next thing that was mentioned was the library and Marcus Hill, looking at the electricity, solar panels, the consideration of battery supplies, etc. I still would recommend that.
Could you give us the line number you're looking at so that we can all get on the same page?
I haven't got a line number.
Oh, I see.
Sorry.
Okay.
So this office, council office's electricity is line 223.
Thank you.
And
library 203.
Library 203.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Line 203, everybody. Yeah.
So in terms of our costs, I've left them in as they are. There were discussions about doing all of these things, but how quickly these things will happen. I think it was prudent to leave it as it is for the coming year, and that be a focus of this committee to work through to impact the following
year. And I wasn't suggesting a reduction.
Okay.
It's there. Whether if we can afford to do it earlier on in the year and do it in year with that. That was the suggestion.
Yeah, great.
On that one, can I just make perhaps a recommendation on things like solar panels and that sort of stuff? These things can clearly save us a lot of money.
Yeah.
They absolutely can, but they cost us a lot of money to install and therefore you don't get the payback for a long time. I think over 30 councils in Cornwall have applied for carbon reduction measures through SPF for village halls, offices, all of that sort of. In fact, we don't fund a capital project on a premises unless you put carbon reduction measures in it. You know, my recommendation would be from this committee would be direction to the grants officer to forget about grants for play parks and stuff at the moment, but specifically look for grants for capital investment of the cost-saving measures. There are other schemes out there that are not just grant schemes, there are various loan schemes. We can lend as a council on a very reduced rate, etc., etc. That means we don't have to hack into reserves if we think we can make the repayments. So you can lend for carbon reduction at 4%, which is very low. All of those sorts of things. In my eyes, this is what the grants officer should be doing at the moment in these fiscally challenging times.
I'm happy to, second that with the tweak that I believe, my understanding is the grants officer may have capacity to, and in fact, we're sort of looking from my discussions with them in that direction. We'd just be giving a bit of a steer to do a bit more on that, a bit faster, rather than stopping everything else. So that's my tweak to support your proposal, Councillor Gardner. If anyone else would like to second that we pass that delegated authority through.
It's not a
Okay,
it's just-
doesn't have to be a
no, it's just-
resolution.
yes.
Okay, so if the team can, if somebody can, who would be responsible for helping Kieran get that update?
Dan, the facilities manager,
Thank you.
and Kieran.
Yeah, just I realise it's late and everybody's had a long day, so I'm
solar
just
for
making
the-
sure we're all. Yeah.
And to your point, Councillor Gardner, actually, when you look at the cost of solar installation and battery at this site, the payback period is very, very short compared to most solar installations, just because of the sheer amount of electric that we are using on these sites, £40,000 a year. You know, I think, you know, it's a no-brainer. So, no, for sure. I mean, I'm not. I'm certainly supportive of the facilities manager and the grants officer working together on that one. And sorry.
And so just to finalise the line that you were raising, and responsible finance officer, you said line 203 electricity, but I think
We're leaving them as they are.
We're just leaving them as they are. We were just having a conversation.
Okay, I'm trying to understand, because that I only see £8,400 going up to 8,900, although further down I see a £15,000 in towards the roof, which I thought maybe that's what you're meaning. You want us to keep in.
No, the roof money you need to keep in as well, but, you know.
Right, okay, so I'm not entirely clear what the point of what you were just saying was.
Marcus Hill Electric is projected next year to be £30,207.
And you were saying lower.
Library is projected to be 8,918,
Thank you.
40 grand together roughly. We are saying.
So she's responding to the point that you raised. Thank you. Okay, sorry. And you had other points.
Yeah, so the next one I've got is South Fistral Car Park. Yep. The process, my understanding of the process of, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but the understanding of the process of increasing your car parking fees is quite a lengthy one and quite costly. So that's something that should be considered. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but that's something that needs to be considered in the process of doing that. So that is something that we can look at. At the moment, the costs that are in the budget are exactly the same as the projected for this year. So if you want me to increase that, I can do so.
But I think on the basis that we have increased income from that site by around 20% year on year for both this year, last year and the year before, that we should not be pessimistic around that. We should project 20% for the next year, the year after, and the year after that.
So what would that be?
2,400, so 26,000.
Another 2,400.
No, more than that,
So I was
sorry.
working, how would you?
Double that.
Well,
Another
the
5.
increase from last year to this year is only 9%.
We haven't got to the end of the year yet.
No, but that is projected on a profile budget, so it's over the last, since we've had it, so it'll be pretty accurate. So, I mean, you're looking, I don't want to increase it 20%, that's not realistic.
Okay, 15%.
Okay?
Yeah.
And we can look at car parking fees.
Yeah.
I believe we normally do that in the January, February meeting.
And thank you for that heads up.
Yes, when you, because it's got to be really done and dusted by March.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay.
And you said you wanted to increase it by that year on year? Okay.
Do we need to vote on that? Line? Or do we just
Don't vote
go,
on
we're
every
thinking all
single
these
line,
things
but
and
I
we
think
agree on it at the
You
end?
need to have a consensus that that is a, you know, that you're all in
Yeah,
agreement.
all
That's
right,
the
good,
path you want to
yeah,
take.
Good.
There was a suggestion of putting in a 10% reduction on the toilets to go through for next year. I am always the
Look for
doom
efficiency.
and gloom, aren't I?
Yes.
So, as I said in the meeting last time, I don't disagree that this isn't something that needs to be looked at, but we are looking at a budget that goes from April next year for 12 months, and it will go quickly. So, you know, we're already, time flies. What takes more time with councils is actually carrying out and changing things. Now, and this is where if we're going to discuss this, I think it ought to be in confidential.
Oh, apologies. So I need to propose that we close the meeting, is that correct? And move into, sorry. Thank you.
If there's anything else you want to discuss in open session now, probably.
Yeah, right. I did.
Close, it's quite difficult to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
I did offer any other business, no points were raised.
Anything else on the budget?
Yeah.
Should we go through
Oh,
the
sorry,
other
on the
things
budget?
on here
Thank you.
first?
Thank you, Anne.
They're a bit further down. Sorry. Okay, great. Town Enhancement Fund, I just was going to change the wording. That is on, I'm just trying to find it, just bear with me.
Imagine you can go
Line
there.
46.
Yeah. Oh. Town
Line 46, yeah.
Enhancement Fund. Right, done that.
Right.
Yeah. So the next thing was, I've got down the increase in the cost of South Fistral.
That was due to the playground, I think, is that? I'm pretty sure that was due to the playground needing repairs to be able to retain safety standards.
Can you just shout the lines out when
Yeah.
you go on to it, so I don't have to keep going through this.
Yeah, so this line, South Fistral Car Park expenditure is 123. So what we've done is we included £2,000, which wasn't in there from previous years, for play area repairs, because we were putting in a rolling programme because that play equipment's getting quite old. Replacement of play equipment surfacing's quite expensive. You've already spent that, I think, or planned to spend that this year. And we wanted to be prudent in having that within the budget so that you can, as a manager, go ahead and replace things without them coming to committee and manage that area. So that was the biggest increase there.
So you just said £2,000, but the budget goes from 13,000 to 19,000?
Yeah, that's the biggest increase. The other ones are generally smaller ones, apart from grounds maintenance, which we have now put in the budget following the recommendation from the report, the replenishment of the turf, the Biffa waste contract, and rolling programmes of surfacing repairs for the site and
Can I
the
just
play
ask,
areas.
are you looking at this document or this document?
That one there.
Okay, thank you.
And
Because
I'm
you're
looking
using
at
different wording to what's
line
written here.
113. and
Grounds maintenance, thank you.
121. They're the two biggest increases in this budget. If you look at last year's actuals, you've got a lot of money under maintenance, repairs and renewals.
Yep.
At least half that, probably more, was related to grounds maintenance, which is why we've put grounds maintenance in. When we had the report that went from Joe, we looked at the different requests within that and have added them into this budget.
I'm going to be honest. I never like miscellaneous expenses in a budget. It never looks great. I'd rather just see it all in maintenance if that's what it's going to be.
Well, I have put in the comments play area repairs so that we know that that's what it's for.
Okay. Can I also ask about while we're on ground maintenance?
Yeah.
For Priory Woods, I mean, there's what are we spending that on? Because it's woods.
Yeah, we've actually got grant funding for that. So we've got £1,500 grant to improve the access and essentially just look after it throughout the year. For the next 10 years, that's £1,500 per year. So this is for our team to go around improving the pathways, doing the trees, surveys, any issues with ash dieback and the such. So I think that's pretty much what that's for.
So can I propose we take that out then, that £2,000, if we're getting 1,500 a year?
We've got to spend it.
We do occasionally have to cut trees down. If they have ash dieback and stuff.
But these lads are cutting trees down, aren't they? We're not paying.
No, that you don't take the big trees down, do you?
No, we can do ground level to a certain height, but full trees, it's a contractor.
Yeah, I mean, I think my point is we've never had the £1,500 before. We've now got it each year. So surely we should be, or surely we could, for example, take £1,500 out of our own maintenance budget. Or are we saying there's an extra bit? We've got to get brutal here. We're not going to get 27% off unless we start getting brutal.
Sorry, which other maintenance line are you proposing that it came out of?
53.
53. So
when my understanding of the grant application process that we've had to carry out so far is we have to provide the RPA with invoices that have been paid to claw down the money. So if you want the grant funding, then you need to put the expenditure in. You may choose to reduce it to 1,500 so that it's matched exactly and there's no additional funding from the council.
Yeah, I get that, but that's just an accounting function, isn't it? Because you don't need to put an extra 1,500 in. You just need to account for that in the way that you account for that money. As long as it goes out and comes back in again, you don't need an extra budget line for it, do you?
Actually, this year you are already better because last year you had £2,000 in there to carry out works that were necessary, but this year you've got an income, so it's actually only costing you 500 this year, not the 2,000 that you budgeted for next year. So you're actually better off on this year and next year than you're budgeted for because we didn't budget for the grant funding. So it's only costing us £500.
All right. It's okay. I'm reading that it's costing us £2,000, that we're putting £2,000 into it.
right, yeah. And again, it was discussed in the meeting the other day, which is why I'm sort of going a bit fast. Sorry. And did you?
Mount Wise Gardens, he said, is 1,000 enough? Was that the open space? Because there's a number of them. Yes. So
however, that rhetorical question, I'm happy to say it's going to have to be enough because we need to be brutal.
You asked about the library and the fact that there are two elements in the library for the roof.
Do you have a line for that?
I get there.
Oh, here, 601? Or?
Yeah, it is. So the line is 207
206.
and 213.
Yeah, it's odd to split a single project across two budget lines.
Yeah, I think this is more to do with the fact that maybe I should have written the word solar in there because there was some discussions about having a solar panel as well as the roof, and I'd originally put the roof in at the 15, and I think that we had wanted to do the solar panels as well. So it's probably more my wordings, plus the project could be 80 to 100.
And that was about a saving, that if people are going to get on the roof to fix the roof, then that may present a saving around getting solar panels installed at the same time. We don't know yet. We probably, actually, if someone in construction here says it will. Okay, great, thank you.
Gonna have to,
But
close the
if,
extension.
if,
Sorry, we're going to have to, we're at 24 minutes past. Sorry?
We can only go to 10.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody wants to. Thank you.
so there was conversations about grant funding SPF for that particular project. If that's what you want to do, then you could reduce some of this. But, you know.
So my impression at an overall level, just conscious of time, is that you've made a number of notes about things, both from Councillor Creek and Councillor Gardner, and you've got some points from the other meeting that you're saying you didn't get a chance to make updates on here. You mentioned we may need to have an emergency meet. We'd need to have another meeting to actually approve, and I just don't think we can approve this right now because we can't see a number. I think all of us are probably on the same page that we're not in a position to
I
actually.
mean, everything that you discussed at last meeting, apart from some wording, is already in front of you. So apart from things that you can't put in this budget because you have no idea of what the impact is going to be, and they're next year's projects, if you like, for this committee. So that was most of what we talked through was those. And I'm going through the ones that have been highlighted by Councillor Creek.
Can
and
I
can
quickly
give
just
you the
propose the
figure.
extension before we get to carry on?
Yeah.
10 o'clock. Not that we hopefully make 10.
So I suppose the question is, you've got 25,000.
No, I thought our hands went up.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to go till 10?
To be honest, I haven't been home yet. I've been out since 7 o'clock this morning. I don't want to go till 10 o'clock.
Well, we'll whip through it, it's fine.
Do you want to change line 207 and 213 that are a contribution of £25,000 towards the solar panels and the roof project?
I would agree with Councillor Gardner and wrap them up in one line for the project of the roof, given that the roof project is going to cost.
Chair, I think overall here, we have to, if we don't want this, I think what we've done is we've written the budget for everything that we want. I've got no problem with that approach. It's come out with a figure that certainly if more than one of us don't feel comfortable with, and a few of us don't feel comfortable with. So we either have to feel comfortable with that, or we've got to say we cannot do everything that we want to do. And I know we've got projects in here that we want to do. We want to do solar panels on the library, of course we do. But we're going to have, we want to put money into EMRs for toilets, but we're going to have to accept that we can't if we don't want that 27%. So we're either going to have to get really, really brutal and start cutting stuff out, because to get to save £100,000, we're going to have to really go at this, and I don't think we can go at this right now. Or so we're going to have to call an emergency or whatever. It's unfair of Anne to recalculate that 27% figure right here and now. Yeah, I agree. We're going to have to at least give some direction to Al, to Anne, some general principles to say, we're not, and I know you don't budget set it. You don't budget set by working out what you want your precept to be. Don't get me wrong, that's not the way to budget set. But we at least need to give her a steer of where we need this to go to become acceptable, I think. But that's what I would say, because we're not cutting anything out in great shakes that's not going to get us this £100,000 off the budget.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few other points which I think were raised earlier also on rental income. If I take line 218 on council officers, it's at £1. Mm-hmm. And at least this evening, the feedback has been we want an actual number in there, a target for the team, and that would therefore edit the numbers at the end. But we can't see that number right now.
It should be at least the budget that we had in place for this year, if not what we took last year.
We don't have a tenant. There is a lot of works that need doing up there.
Can't tell me that the office can't find a tenant in the next 6 months. The vacant spaces that we have in this building.
I don't know what work needs doing up there before you can re-let it out.
But it's been let out.
It was good enough for Cornwall Council, but it will have no internet, it will have no electrics. We can't add to the electrics in this building. you know, and I'm not saying, what I'm saying is I don't know enough about the state of that rented space to say that, yes, you can go in and it can be made fairly reasonably available for other people, because it was set up for Cornwall Council. They have taken their stuff. They still haven't, I mean, again, we're in open. I don't, you know.
How did they work with no electrics?
No, they had all their own stuff. But the point with this building is we are not allowed to amend or change any of the electrics within. We've been told that that's it. So,
but there is some electrics in there. I mean, as somebody who's rented office spaces in Newquay, I just need one plug for my laptop. You know, it's not rocket science. And
I think the point is, though, there is no point in putting a figure in the budget which is not realisable. Cornwall Council are paying less money for a brand new refurbished office down the road now than they were paying upstairs. So we have to be realistic about this, and there's no point in putting 12 grand in if we can't get 12 grand.
It doesn't have to be 12 grand. That's a fair point. But to put £1 in just doesn't, you know, again, as Councillor Craig said, that's from 6 months from now.
But I think the building itself, they'd have to do a sort of, you'd have to get somebody into, not a builder, somebody in to have a look at the building, see what you could or couldn't do, and that will cost money before you could re-let it, because Cornwall Council, I'm not saying they don't care where they staff. Their staff have been up there historically. A lot of them have been working from home, and it wasn't pop in, pop out. There was very few people that were in there all day.
Again, there are multiple places in this town where all that is provided is a power plug that hundreds of people in Newquay are renting. Literally a desk, a power plug, and Wi-Fi. And in a couple of those places, the Wi-Fi doesn't even work, and a lot of people are using their phones to hotspot.
But you're saying we shouldn't rely on any rental income?
I don't think it's that simple, though.
what I'm saying is, historically, things aren't that simple, especially when you have a building that has real limitations on it that everybody's aware of. And what I'm saying is, I don't know how usable that space is immediately, what it can be offered for, and how much money you're going to get for it. So what I'm saying is there's too many variables for me to just pick a figure out.
It's very, very questionable legally, I think, to balance your budget by putting a rental figure in when you haven't got a tenant and you don't know how long it's going to take to get a tenant.
Well, we're doing that in Killicourt.
Well, the Killicourt we know. So the Killicourt, for example, we've got estate agent already engaged. We've got we know they're rentable in terms of material state, all that sort of stuff. It's perfectly reasonable to expect an income from the Killicourt. I don't think it's reasonable to expect an income from upstairs. Not certainly to any level for Anne to financially plan to. We want it to be done, of course we do, and we definitely want it.
And it might, you know.
And we might.
Okay.
Well, as a councillor, I'm uncomfortable with us not setting a strategic direction on utilising our property for the taxpayer, but thank you for the input, and there are other points. Thank you if you wanted to.
Sorry, Anne, why is it that we have a £15,000 reduction in rental income 251 on the Mount Wise Centre? Because bar one office, which I believe has recently become vacant,
so the reason
we're projecting a £22,000 year-end position.
So the reason is, in all previous years, the service charge has been included in the rent, and I don't like that, so I've split it out. So if you look... then follow-up question, why is the service charge projected to only be 1,600? Because I'm fairly sure that I pay more than that myself for my office a quarter. Oh, I have missed that figure, but if you look in the budget, I put in what's projected for next year, so I apologise for that.
Oh, right.
So if you look at next year's budget, there's like nearly 13 grand in there. Yeah, so sorry. I've highlighted it, I will put it in.
Were there other points you'd...
So...
Service charge on the Killicourt?
Yes.
Service charge, that is done. I'm not sure why. We've definitely done the service charge for the Killicourt.
It's stating as 0 on line 286.
Yes. So...
Definitely has been done, because we've had a few challenges.
Yeah.
Went out this time last year, I believe.
Went out only, like a few months ago. So I apologise for that. That is an error because I definitely have done it. And it was 235 times.
I think Councillor Gardner asked about temporary toilets. I'm not sure what line on the budget that was. Councillor Gardner, do you recall?
What's that, sorry?
You said something about, you were querying temporary toilets.
I've increased that to 85% as well as per your request for chemical.
I'll find the temporary toilet.
Have you also changed the,
hang on, let
the
me.
rates line on that same basis?
Yeah, I will.
Temporary toilets is 349.
Thank you.
Just for context for temporary toilets, doesn't mean we need to keep doing it, but what we used to have that line for was mainly the Heron Centre temporary provision.
We didn't do it this year, did we?
We didn't. Yeah, so just for context, if you want to know why it's always been there, that's why it was there.
Sorry, I didn't catch who you said it was for, please.
So the council used to support the Heron Centre with temporary toilets throughout the summer. Doesn't do that anymore, and it's like Councillor Garden said, it's in their lease. So generally, it's always just ad hoc Portaloo hire, but yeah, it's not necessarily an obligation we have anymore.
We can take that out.
Yeah. Sounds like agree to remove that line.
So that is line 349, yeah?
Yes, thank you. 3K.
How much was that?
3,000. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then Councillor Gardner said toilets, every single is down on income. But Councillor Creek was pointing out that that data may not have been reflecting what's going on, and that some of the toilets, the payment machines had not been installed, which is why there's no income there for them. So I believe we have payment machine installations booked. Is that the case, Dan?
Yeah, we have Narrowcliffe installed. The next phase was, I believe,
Just
Kilcourt.
achieved that, is that right?
Narrowcliffe.
Well
yes.
done, thank you, great. Do you know what line that is? Thanks, sorry. Narrowcliffe. And so do we need to make a change to that one, if anyone can find it?
Well, I mean, it's not probably for now, but it is thing. You know, Killicourt toilet. That's a really good example. 23-24 it took £7,742 pounds, and our year-end forecast for this year is 4,885, and we're forecasting even less the next year. I mean, that is like almost, you know, it's a 40% reduction.
There was a period of time when them toilets were unlocked and we as councillors didn't know about it. It was quite a lengthy period, wasn't it, Dan? Yeah. So we lost income because there was no charge.
Okay. 4 Street toilets down from 16,321 to 7,119.
They were so short. We're about to change them. I mean, I have got I've got the separate toilets figures, and they've gone up 20% in the last couple of years. So
can you circulate those round on? Because I think it's
I'll review and update.
It's the largest expenditure of this committee, and I find it really, really worrying when our most popular toilets are halving their income.
Yeah.
And so just to clarify again, I wasn't sure what you'd summarise for us, Anne. If we take 4 Street toilets, as Councillor Gardner says, there's a few years back, 16,000 income. The current number's saying 7,000. You're projecting 9,000, and that's 7,000. I don't think it goes to the year end. Is that correct?
I'm just finding it.
And that's line 395, sorry.
Let me look at the actuals.
And if we look at that 9,000 that year, that was the year of COVID, wasn't it? So
no, I mean, COVID was a long time ago.
Okay, but the 16,000 certainly.
So in 2022-23, 4 Street income was 5,300.
What line are you looking at? Sorry,
I'm looking at a different report. Okay. In 23-24, it was 7,000.
4 Street toilets income.
This will be,
because I've got a £16,000 number here.
Where are we?
on line 395. That's a significant difference. Sorry, we have a lot of these lines, don't we?
That's last year's. I'd have to look at it.
Yeah. Okay, so we are,
No, we think some of the disparity here is the difference between the actual year to date on this sheet, which goes to the 31st of the 7th, and now just this one, and this was the year to date up until the 30th of the 9th. There's obviously a difference between that one and that one.
Yes.
The thing that's out on this one, though, is the forecasting.
Yeah.
So for instance, this is making it really hard, and I'll tell you for why, is because the forecasting, so for example, the Killicourt toilets, income last year was 7,741. The income this year thus far is 7,322, which is good, which is up.
We're forecasting
but we're forecasting back on the other sheet of £5,000. So the forecasting isn't enough on the toilets compared to the actual year to date.
I would agree with
That's
that.
where the issues are.
Thank you.
So we're forecasting down on income, which gives us a bigger deficit.
Yeah.
And that's across more than one.
Yeah.
And for up to the end of those budgets, year to dates are up to September.
Yeah.
That's 81% of your income for the whole year.
Yeah, but my point.
Yeah.
But the point is, you've done your forecasting on this document based on the year to date to the 31st to the 7th.
Yeah. And
Actually ended up much better than that. We've clearly had a good August.
So we should forecast
And we need to forecast off these
Yeah.
because the forecast is pessimistic.
So if you add that 20%, you get another 1,000, which takes it to at least 6, which is
So I need
closer
to
that,
go
so-
through the actuals
to
and-
September.
to September. I can input September's figures into the budget to do that.
I know you need an area, you've got to be pessimistic to a certain extent, but we're
Yeah.
forecasting 2,000 less than we've done today.
Exactly.
And if you carry that down all the toilets, I
Yeah.
haven't checked every one, I just picked the obvious one. If that's across all the toilets, then the forecast of thousands out.
Yeah,
And that means the budget, the budget deficit is way out.
yeah,
And that might ease a lot of our problems. And then if we add a little bit of what Councillor Creek is saying, take some of that second down, perhaps not as much as that, but go a little bit more in line with what the officer's saying. And then some of the other little tweaks we've made, it might not be as gloomy a figure. Can I also say as well, I'm always a big fan at this stage of starting to get a feel for what other committees are doing. Because we've got to remember, it may be, as unpalatable as it is, that this committee, because of its priorities and its importance to the council, warrants perhaps a 15-20% budget increase. And it may be, until we hear what the other committees are doing, especially around the admin, the actual running of the council. We've got 2 vacant posts for enforcement officers at the moment. We have we have 1 vacant. But what I'm trying to say without going into specifics is until you see what the rest of the committees are doing, including the main committee, the big spend, which is running the council, we might have to just accept an increase on this committee, and we might have to find the saving through GNR somewhere else to balance out the books at the end of the day. Because if you're not careful, you can completely destroy what a committee is trying to do by just focusing on trying to get your committee spend down to what we spent last year. And it might not be in the overall picture. I just like at some point to see what the whole council is doing. And we seem a way away from it yet, which is a bit worrying.
Can I make a suggestion, Chair? And I'll just throw it out there. Depends how people feel. I have no problem with coming back to this. It's a really important thing. It's the most important thing that we do all year. We have to give Anne a bit of time to do this.
Sorry, guys.
I think we've given Anne a fair bit of direction of where we wanted to look, particularly on the toilets.
Yeah.
And I would also like the figures from the other committees, if that's okay. Just so I can start to get a feel of the overall. Because actually, if we look at this and then the overall figure comes back and it's a 4% precept rise, I've got much less of an issue. Right. So why don't we agree that we need another meeting in 2 weeks' time?
Can we have a precept effect as well? Because You know, although it's a 27% increase on this committee, we don't know if everything else stayed the same across the other committees. We don't know what the precept difference this makes.
Yes, I think we got that point. Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
We
So
agree with that.
can I sort of say, so the majority of the stuff that you've highlighted by the toilets, I've adjusted this evening. I can go and adjust the toilets and recirculate those figures so that you have where you are with what we've discussed this evening.
We will see a different number at the bottom.
Yeah, it's already down to 96,000 rather than what it was before.
Which was 114, I think.
So, so I can circulate that. GNR are meeting on the 25th of this month. They have the biggest budget. They haven't sat down together and had an opportunity to go through it. And if you're wanting to look at the total impact of other budgets, you really need to wait till you've seen that one, because that's the biggest one. C&T have done their budget, and HR are meeting next week or the week after, so they haven't yet had their opportunity. So maybe if you want to look at that very early December might be a better chance to do that.
That we be sent the C&T one, if it's available to us already, just so that we can all review that, because these take a bit of time, each of them, to go through. And then, as you pointed out, the GNR is not available yet, HR isn't available yet, but each of them will take a bit of time to get through. Thank you. Sorry, and look, thanks to everybody for all their good work. I'm sorry it's really late. I had proposed that we have another meeting, which I'm afraid I think it's very hard to approve the budget with you know, so many changes to the numbers needed. But thank you, Anne, that you've captured so many of them. And therefore, I think, unless there were any other final points, I've taken notes of what Councillor Gardner said, what Councillor Krieg said. I can email those to you, and just in case, I know you're scribbling madly like the rest of us, so that we don't have to repeat it again in another meeting. And any points you're not clear on, if you could email this committee so that we can get ahead of that next meeting. We don't use too much of the staff time, because I'm conscious that we're coming up to sort of 6 hours of staff time, which I'm really sorry and I don't think is fair. When it's our job to review those figures and find out as councillors.
I would like to, if it's possible, in confidential, just give a heads up to the councillors that weren't at that meeting. Okay. So, just a very snippet, so it might help.
So to anyone watching, we've been in a very detailed review of the budget. We need to go further to make sure we're making the right savings needed. And on that note, I propose to close this meeting. Thank you. Sorry, not close the meeting, to go off the public, what do we call it? Public goodbye to the watchers online, so that we can go into exempt on some issues that we can't discuss publicly. God, thank you. Sorry.
Just a vote to go.
Sorry, vote to go into exempt. Sorry, can I propose that we go into exempt? Thank you to Councillor Slade for